Have you ever wondered why personal relationships, whether with family, friends, or partners, can feel so exhausting, even when we're doing our best? You pour in effort, patience, and understanding, yet misunderstandings still creep in, emotions flare up, and connections strain under the weight of expectations. It's as if no matter how hard we try, human relationships remain one of life's greatest puzzles. But what if the answer isn't about changing others or waiting for the perfect circumstances? What if the key lies in an ancient philosophy that's been guiding people toward clarity and resilience for over 2,000 years? Stoicism, practiced by emperors like Marcus Aurelius, isn't just about enduring hardship. It's a powerful toolkit for transforming how we show up in every relationship, starting with the one we have with ourselves. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome at its height, faced betrayals, political intrigue, and personal loss. Yet his writings reveal a man who refused to let external chaos dictate his inner peace. His central lesson: the only control we truly have is over our own thoughts, reactions, and choices. Imagine applying that radical ownership to your relationships. Instead of reacting to a partner's sharp words with defensiveness, you pause and ask, what part of this is within my power to address? When a friend disappoints you, you choose to focus not on their actions, but on how you'll uphold your own values in response. This shift from blaming others to mastering your own responses is where Stoicism becomes a game changer. In this video, we'll explore 40 timeless Stoic lessons distilled into practical themes like communication without ego, building unshakable resilience, and mastering emotions without suppressing them. These aren't abstract ideas, they're actionable steps tested by generations. You'll learn how to disagree without venom, set boundaries without guilt, and cultivate relationships that nourish rather than drain you. Whether you're navigating a rocky marriage, a tense workplace, or the complexities of family dynamics, these principles will help you respond with wisdom instead of reacting with frustration. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming intentional, ready to transform your relationships from the inside out. Let's begin. The first and most transformative Stoic lesson for relationships is this: focus relentlessly on what you can control. The ancient teacher Epictetus drew a simple but life-altering line between two categories: things that depend on us and things that do not. Your opinions, your actions, your values, these are yours to command. But other people's choices, their moods, even their respect or affection, those belong firmly in the outside your control column. Here's why this matters. Every minute spent agonizing over someone else's behavior is energy stolen from where you could actually make a difference, your own response. Picture this: a close friend cancels dinner plans last minute for the third time. You might spiral into frustration, replaying their unreliability in your mind, or even crafting pointed messages to guilt-trip them. But Stoicism asks a sharper question: what part of this situation can you truly direct? You can't force your friend to prioritize you, but you can choose whether to communicate your feelings calmly, adjust your expectations, or decide if this friendship still aligns with your boundaries. That shift from demanding others' change to refining your own stance is where real power lies. Think of one relationship where you've been stuck in this trap. Maybe it's a sibling who never listens, a colleague who takes credit for your ideas, or a partner who withdraws during conflict. How much mental space have you lost trying to fix their behavior? Now imagine redirecting that effort inward. What if, instead of resenting their actions, you asked, how can I uphold my dignity here? What boundaries or adjustments would protect my peace? This isn't passive acceptance, it's strategic ownership. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly in his Meditations. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The irony, when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, relationships often improve anyway. People sense the absence of pressure or manipulation. They respond to your calm consistency, but even if they don't, you've preserved something far more valuable, your equilibrium. That's the Stoic secret. Mastery begins the moment you stop demanding the world bend to your will and start focusing on the one thing that's always within your grasp, your next move. Seneca, one of Stoicism's wisest voices, offered a counterintuitive practice that transforms how we value our relationships: negative visualization. At first glance, it sounds unsettling, deliberately imagining the loss of someone you love. But this exercise, called premeditatio malorum, isn't about dwelling on pain. It's about shaking ourselves awake to the fragile, fleeting beauty of the people in our lives before it's too late. Think of it as emotional gratitude training. When was the last time you paused to truly savor the sound of a loved one's laughter or the comfort of their presence without waiting for a crisis to remind you? We've all fallen into the trap of taking relationships for granted. The partner who always listens becomes background noise. The friend who never fails to show up feels like a given. But Stoicism asks, what if today were the last conversation you ever had with them, not as a morbid fixation, but as a lens to sharpen your attention? Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." By mentally rehearsing loss, we strip away complacency and uncover a deeper layer of appreciation, one that doesn't require absence to feel. Try this tonight. Pull out a journal and write down 3 things you'd miss most if a key person in your life were suddenly gone. Not grand, abstract qualities, but the small, irreplaceable details. The way your mother hums off key while cooking, how your best friend knows exactly when to send a ridiculous meme to lift your mood. This exercise isn't meant to frighten you. It's designed to ground you in the present. Notice how your chest tightens at the thought. That's your heart reminding you what matters. The magic of negative visualization lies in its dual effect. It not only deepens gratitude but also prepares us for life's inevitable changes. When conflicts arise, that mental rehearsal softens our reactions. A spilled coffee during a rushed morning stings less when you've already imagined far heavier losses. This practice trains us to hold relationships with open hands, cherishing them fully without clinging possessively. As Seneca observed, we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. Here's the challenge for 1 week. Dedicate 5 minutes each morning to this practice. Pick a different person each day, a colleague, your sibling, your child. Visualize their absence, then watch how your behavior shifts when you interact with them later. You might listen more intently, hug a little longer, or let go of petty grievances faster. That's the Stoic paradox. By confronting loss in our minds, we learn to hold the present more gently, love more fiercely, and waste far less energy on what doesn't matter. The people we cherish aren't guaranteed, but our awareness of that truth, that's entirely within our control. Marcus Aurelius had a rule he repeated to himself like a mantra. You don't have to turn this into something. Those 7 words hold the key to diffusing countless conflicts. Picture this: you're in a heated discussion with your partner about household responsibilities. Their tone shifts from calm to accusatory, and suddenly you feel your pulse quicken. Your jaw clenches. The urge to fire back with twice the intensity surges up. Maybe you even reach for that one cutting remark you've been saving for a moment like this. This is the crossroads where relationships are either fractured or strengthened, And Stoicism offers a lifeline, the gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where your power lies. Marcus Aurelius called it the space of choice. In his private writings, he described how even emperors face provocations, courtiers lying, allies betraying, crowds demanding, but what separated him from a tyrant was his discipline in widening that space. He'd mentally step back and ask, will this reaction serve my character or sabotage it? You don't need a throne to practice this. Next time tensions rise, try physically pausing. Take a sip of water, walk to the window, count to 10. These aren't avoidance tactics, they're resistance training for your emotional reflexes. Think back to a recent moment you wish you could rewind. Maybe it was snapping at a coworker over a missed deadline or shutting down during a family debate. Now replay it with a Stoic edit. Insert that deliberate pause. What changes? Instead of mirroring their frustration, you might have noticed the exhaustion behind their words. Instead of personalizing their criticism, you could have asked, what part of this is actually about me? That's the alchemy of response over reaction, transforming emotional wildfires into conversations that illuminate rather than burn. Here's the practice. Keep a small notebook this week as your reaction log. Each time you feel that familiar heat rising, jot down 3 details: what triggered you, what you wanted to say in the moment, and what you wish you'd said after cooling down. Patterns will emerge. Maybe you're most reactive when tired, or certain topics act like emotional tripwires. Awareness is the first brick in building that pause. As Marcus reminded himself, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. When someone meets anger with calm, accusation with curiosity, they're not surrendering, they're steering the interaction toward higher ground. The Stoics weren't preaching indifference. They understood emotions flash through us like lightning, natural, intense, but fleeting. What we do with that energy determines whether it electrifies or destroys. Your next argument could become the moment you surprise even yourself, not by suppressing emotion, but by channeling it into something wiser. That's the real test of strength, not winning the battle, but choosing which battles are worth fighting. What if the very struggles in your relationships, the misunderstandings, the conflicts, even the heartbreaks weren't obstacles to avoid, but raw material for growth? This is the heart of Ammer, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. Though Nietzsche later championed it, the idea is pure Stoicism, embracing everything life hands you, not with resignation, but with the conviction that even hardship has purpose. Imagine applying this to your relationships, that argument with your partner, a chance to practice patience, the friend who let you down, an invitation to clarify your boundaries. Even betrayal, as crushing as it feels, can become fuel for resilience if you choose to see it as part of your story rather than a derailment. Consider Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who was exiled to Corsica by Emperor Claudius. Banished to a remote island, stripped of status and comfort, he could have drowned in bitterness. Instead, he wrote letters reframing exile as an opportunity, time to study, write, and strengthen his mind. A change of place doesn't weaken courage, he noted. Now apply that lens to relational struggles. A strained marriage isn't just a burden, it's a workshop for communication skills. A falling out with a sibling becomes a masterclass in forgiveness. The Stoics didn't pretend suffering felt good, but they insisted on finding the thread of meaning woven through it. Here's the practice. Pick one current conflict in a relationship, maybe a recurring argument with your teenager about screen time or tension with a coworker over project roles. Now ask 2 questions. What is this situation teaching me about myself? And how could this challenge ultimately strengthen the relationship? For example, those nightly battles over homework might reveal your own fears about your child's future, pushing you to confront whether you're projecting your anxieties onto them. The friction with your colleague could expose gaps in teamwork that, once addressed, make the whole department function better. Ammer turns problems into puzzles, not to minimize their difficulty, but to engage with them creatively. History offers a powerful example in the friendship between Marcus Aurelius and his notoriously difficult co-emperor, Lucius Verus. Verus was impulsive, indulgent, and often undermined Marcus' authority. Yet Marcus chose to see their partnership as a test of his principles, writing, "The cucumber is bitter, put it down, there are brambles in the path. Step around them, enough of this complaining." He didn't pretend Verus was easy, but he refused to let Verus' flaws dictate his own peace. That's the key. Loving fate doesn't mean approving of others' hurtful actions. It means trusting yourself to grow around them. Try this reframe the next time you're stuck in relational quicksand. Picture yourself 5 years from now, looking back on this struggle. What wisdom might you thank it for? Perhaps today's loneliness teaches you to cultivate deeper friendships. A betrayal might reveal your own resilience. Even small irritations, a roommate's messiness or a parent's nagging, can train you in patience if you let them. The Stoics believed nothing was inherently good or bad. Our judgments make them so. When you stop fighting reality and start working with it, conflicts lose their power to define you. They become stepping stones instead. Ammer isn't passive acceptance, it's active engagement. It's saying, this hurt is here, how will I let it shape me? Because the truth is, relationships aren't ruined by storms, they're refined by them. The couple who learns to navigate financial stress builds trust no smooth sailing pair can match. The friendship that survives a period of distance often emerges more honest. Even loss, when fully felt, carves out space for deeper connections later. As Seneca wrote while still in exile, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Your current struggle might just be the whetstone sharpening you for what comes next. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who transformed adversity into wisdom, gave us a mental tool sharper than any modern therapy technique, the discipline of assent. Picture your mind as a courtroom where every thought about others must present evidence before earning your belief. Most of us skip this step. We let jealousy, resentment, or suspicion storm in unchallenged, mistaking raw impressions for truth. Here's how it works. When you feel that familiar pang, your partner laughing a little too long at a coworker's joke, a friend excluding you from plans, Epictetus would say, stop. This impression wants your approval. Ask it 3 questions first. Take jealousy as the ultimate test case. That knot in your stomach when your best friend seems closer to someone new isn't proof of betrayal. It's just a sensation. The discipline of assent forces you to dissect it. What facts do I actually have? Could there be 5 other explanations for this? Maybe your friend's distance has nothing to do with you, they're overwhelmed at work, or the new person is going through a crisis. The Stoic move isn't to suppress the feeling, but to interrogate it like a skeptical juror. This practice shines in our hyper-connected age, where a single unanswered text can spiral into "they're ghosting me" narratives. Ancient Rome didn't have social media, but Epictetus foresaw the danger of unchecked assumptions. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Your roommate's curt reply isn't the problem, it's your unchecked story that they're angry with you. That's the filter in action, separating the event from the drama your mind layers on top. Try this today. Pick one assumption you've been carrying about someone. Your boss favors a colleague. Your sibling judges your life choices. Now grab paper and make 2 columns, observed facts and my interpretations. You'll often find the first column startlingly sparse. The boss gave them 1 extra project. That's data. They're the golden child now is fanfiction. The discipline of assent trains you to spot the gap between what happened and the meaning you assigned. Marcus Aurelius used this daily. When advisors whispered suspicions about his wife, he didn't indulge the gossip. He returned to evidence. Has she given me reason to doubt? No. Then the impression was dismissed like a weak case in court. Imagine applying that rigor to your own relationships. The friend who didn't invite you, maybe they assumed you were busy. The partner who forgot an anniversary, perhaps they're juggling a private stress. This isn't about making excuses for others, but refusing to let your peace depend on unverified stories. Here's the real power. Every time you withhold blind assent from a negative thought, you're not just preserving a relationship, you're strengthening your mind's discernment. Like a muscle, the more you exercise this pause, the more automatic it becomes. Epictetus promised his students, freedom is secured not by the fulfillment of desires, but by the removal of desire. In modern terms, you're free when you stop needing others to behave a certain way for you to be okay. So next time your brain serves up a judgment, they meant to hurt me, hit pause. Ask that crucial question, what part of this is fact and what part is my fear talking? The space between those answers is where emotional freedom begins. There's a Stoic practice so startling in its simplicity that most people initially recoil from it, yet those who embrace it find their relationships transformed. Memento Mori, Latin for remember you must die, isn't about morbidity. It's a wake-up call to presence. Marcus Aurelius scribbled this reminder in his journal. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Imagine applying that razor-sharp awareness to your next conversation. The colleague you half listen to while scrolling, the child tugging at your sleeve as you stare at a screen, the friend sharing vulnerable news while your mind rehearses your response. What if this were the last time you'd hear their voice? Modern life conspires against presence. Notifications buzz, tabs multiply, and attention fractures into a dozen directions. But the Stoics recognized a timeless truth. Distraction is the thief of meaning. When Seneca observed, life is long if you know how to use it, he wasn't talking about lifespan, he meant depth of engagement. Think of your most cherished memories. They're likely moments of undivided connection, laughing until your sides hurt with an old friend, or that quiet midnight talk where time seemed to suspend. Memento Mori doesn't steal joy, it amplifies it by stripping away everything but what's real. Here's the experiment. For one day, begin every interaction by silently asking, if this were our last exchange, how would I show up? Notice how your posture shifts when you truly listen instead of waiting to speak. Watch how your partner's eyes soften when you put your phone face down without prompting. Even mundane moments, helping a neighbor carry groceries, debating politics with your uncle, becomes sacred when framed by fleeting time. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last." Not in panic, but in purposeful attention to the living, breathing humans in front of you. The irony, this practice doesn't just deepen relationships, it reveals which ones are worth your limited time. That acquaintance who drains you with complaints, Memento Mori helps you either engage fully or let go gracefully. The family member you've been meaning to call. Suddenly, later, feels like gambling with borrowed seconds. Even conflicts lose their sting when viewed through this lens. The sting of a harsh word matters less when you remember how few words you may have left to exchange. Try this tonight during dinner or a coffee chat. Set a timer for 5 minutes. For that span, give the other person your complete attention. No devices, no glancing at clocks, no mental grocery lists. Observe their facial expressions, the cadence of their breath, the unspoken emotions beneath their words. That's presence. And when the timer dings, ask yourself, did those minutes feel longer or richer than usual? That's the Momento Mori effect. Time expands when we stop treating it as infinite. The Stoics weren't suggesting we dwell on death obsessively. They were engineers of perspective, using mortality as a tool to excavate what matters. As Marcus wrote, think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly. Every relationship benefits from that clarity. The texts can wait. The notifications aren't urgent, but the person across from you, they're a fleeting miracle here now, gone sooner than you think. And that realization isn't grim. It's the key to loving with your eyes wide open. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, had a radical view of conversation that still shakes us awake 23 centuries later. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. This wasn't just clever wordplay, it was a survival strategy for relationships. Think about the last time you left a gathering feeling drained. Chances are, it wasn't the depth of discussion that exhausted you, but the shallow back and forth of people waiting for their turn to talk rather than truly hearing one another. Stoicism draws a clear line between 2 types of speech, the kind that fills silence with noise and the kind that builds bridges between minds. Gossip, complaints, rehearsed monologues, these are what the Stoics called empty sounds. They're the fast food of communication, momentarily satisfying, ultimately draining. Contrast that with dialogue where you walk away feeling seen, as if the other person had handed you a flashlight to examine your own thoughts. Epictetus warned his students, if you pour a handful of filth into a clear spring, the water stops being fit to drink. Do the same with your speech. Every word either nourishes or pollutes your relationships. The test, ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it fails even one criterion, it's likely noise. Here's where modern life betrays us. We're trained to perform in conversations, to impress, to persuade, to win. Social media rewards hot takes over humble questions. But meaningful connection thrives on a different currency, curiosity. Imagine your next coffee chat as an archaeological dig, where your role isn't to plant flags of your own opinions, but to gently brush away layers until you uncover the other person's authentic perspective. When Marcus Aurelius met with advisors, he practiced double listening, hearing not just their words, but the fears or aspirations humming beneath them. That's how he ruled an empire without losing touch with humanity. Try this experiment today. In your next conversation, measure your airtime not by minutes spoken, but by questions asked. Not the perfunctory, how's work, but inquiries that unearth stories. What surprised you about that experience? When did you feel most alive this week? Watch how the dynamic shifts when you become a curator of their thoughts rather than a broadcaster of your own. The Stoics knew this secret. Listening isn't passive, it's the most active form of respect. As Seneca wrote to a friend, I give you my attention as I would my silence completely. The real test comes when emotions run high. In arguments, we often listen only to reload our rebuttals. But Zeno's principle shines brightest here. When tensions rise, lean in with, help me understand why this matters so much to you, instead of stacking your defenses. That pause, where ego steps aside so empathy can enter, is where conflicts turn into connections. One Roman statesman kept a slave whose sole job was to whisper in his ear during debates, remember, you're mortal. We need no such reminder today. The humility to listen deeply is always within reach. Your challenge this week, choose one interaction per day to practice Stoic silence. Let the other person speak uninterrupted until they naturally conclude. Notice the space that opens when you resist the urge to jump in with, that reminds me. Or, same thing happened to me. Like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, true listening reveals what was there all along. The unspoken hopes, the quiet hurts, the bridges waiting to be built. Zeno's ratio isn't about math, it's about alchemy. When you tip the balance toward hearing, ordinary exchanges become the kind of conversations that echo in memory long after the words fade. Consider the last time a relationship left you emotionally seasick, those dizzying highs of connection followed by crushing lows of misunderstanding or loss. Maybe it was a breakup that hollowed you out or a friendship that faded without closure. In those moments, Stoicism offers not numbness, but something far more powerful: equanimity. The Stoics called it apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but a steady inner calm that persists whether relationships flourish or fracture. Picture a lake at dawn, its surface so still it mirrors the sky. That's the Stoic ideal, not the absence of waves, but the depth to remain undisturbed by them. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most influential teacher, framed it bluntly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Imagine applying that to heartbreak. The pain is real. Stoicism never denies that, but the suffering, that's optional. Here's the distinction. Grief is the natural response to loss. Torment is what we add when we tell ourselves, this shouldn't have happened or I'll never love again. Equanimity isn't about suppressing tears. It's about refusing to let those tears drown your clarity. Think of a recent emotional storm in your relationships. Maybe a partner's betrayal, a parent's disapproval, or a colleague's passive aggression. Now zoom out. What if you'd viewed that pain through Epictetus' lens, not as a personal indictment, but as weather passing through? This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's emotional sovereignty. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, remember the breakup analogy, not to anticipate misery, but to rehearse their resilience. By mentally walking through worst-case scenarios, what if they leave? What if they betray me? They strip those events of their power to destabilize. Here's the practice. Identify one emotion currently hijacking your peace: resentment toward an ex, anxiety about a friend's loyalty, jealousy in your marriage. Now personify it. Imagine it as a frantic neighbor pounding on your door, demanding you join their chaos. Equanimity is the act of peering through the peephole and saying, I see you, but I won't let you in. The Stoic sage Aristo compared emotions to unruly guests. You wouldn't let a stranger rearrange your furniture. Why let anger rearrange your mind? The irony: this detachment often deepens connection. When you stop clutching relationships like life rafts, when you know you'll remain upright even if they dissolve, you engage from a place of freedom, not fear. Love becomes a choice, not a compulsion. Marcus Aurelius modeled this with his notoriously unfaithful wife Faustina. Rather than rage or despair, he wrote, when someone's behavior seems wrong, ask yourself, can I be certain it's wrong? And if so, does their flaw require my misery? His tranquility wasn't indifference, it was the quiet strength to love without losing himself. Try this reframe today. The next time a relational storm hits, pause and ask, what part of this pain is inevitable, and what part am I creating by resisting reality? Like a tree bending in wind, equanimity isn't rigidity. It's the flexibility to endure without breaking, or as Epictetus put it, no thing is miserable unless you think it so. Your relationships will still ache sometimes, but they'll no longer have the power to unmake you. Every difficult person in your life holds up a mirror to something you've yet to master. That's the Stoic shift that turns resentment into revelation. Marcus Aurelius called it the art of turning obstacles into fuel, and nowhere does this burn brighter than in relationships. Think of that colleague who constantly interrupts you in meetings. Your instinct might be frustration, even contempt, but what if you flip the lens? Instead of seeing them as a nuisance, ask, what does this friction reveal about my own communication habits? Maybe their interruptions expose your tendency to ramble. pushing you to articulate ideas more crisply. Or perhaps their dominance highlights your own reluctance to assert space, a nudge to strengthen your voice. History gives us a masterclass in this approach with Cato the Younger, the Stoic statesman who made a practice of thanking his political enemies. When adversaries spread rumors about him, he didn't retaliate. He reflected, what weakness in me gives their words power? If a lie stings, perhaps it touches a truth I've avoided. That's the teacher hidden in every critic. Your overbearing boss isn't just a source of stress, they're a drill sergeant for your patience. The friend who always cancels plans, a live workshop in managing expectations without bitterness. Take this real-world example. A project manager kept clashing with a teammate who dismissed her ideas. After weeks of simmering, she applied Marcus' question, "What's the lesson here?" She realized her presentations lacked data to back creativity. The difficult colleague became her unwitting coach, pushing her to blend vision with evidence. Later, when she aced a client pitch using this refined approach, she sent him a coffee gift card with a note, "Thanks for the tough love." That's Stoic alchemy, transforming relational lead into gold. The practice works even in deeper wounds. A betrayed spouse asked herself, "What's this teaching me about my own boundaries?" The answer didn't excuse the betrayal, but it revealed her pattern of overlooking red flags for harmony's sake. Growth emerged not from the pain itself, but from her willingness to mine it for meaning. As Epictetus taught, if someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be outraged. Yet you hand your mind to anyone who insults you. Try this today. Pick one recurring tension in a relationship. Instead of cataloging their faults, journal 3 ways this dynamic might be stretching you. The neighbor who complains about your lawn, maybe they're training you in responding calmly to unfair criticism. The sibling who needles you about life choices. An opportunity to practice non-defensive confidence. Even toxic relationships, when safely observed, can teach us what we will no longer tolerate. Here's the paradox. When you stop seeing people as problems and start seeing them as professors, your world becomes a classroom. Not every lesson will be pleasant, but all are formative. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly in his Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. That coworker who gets under your skin, they're not obstructing your path, they're the path. And the diploma awaiting you isn't a piece of parchment, but unshakable peace forged through every friction. Seneca called anger brief insanity, a flash fire in the mind that burns the hand that holds it. Picture this: someone cuts you off in traffic, and for the next 20 minutes, your blood pressure spikes, your thoughts race with imagined confrontations, and the rest of your morning darkens. Now stretch that venom across years of nursing a grudge against a parent, an ex, or a former friend. That's what the Stoics saw clearly. Resentment isn't justice served. It's self-inflicted poison sipped slowly while waiting for the other person to feel its effects. History offers a chilling example in Seneca's own life. Exiled to Corsica by Emperor Claudius, he had every reason to stew in bitterness. Instead, he wrote, "Anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." His insight cuts deeper the longer you sit with it. When you withhold forgiveness, you're not imprisoning the offender, you're chaining yourself to the past. Every replay of the hurt, every mental rehearsal of what you should have said, becomes another sip from that toxic cup. But Stoic forgiveness isn't about excusing harm or pretending wounds don't exist. It's a strategic release, the emotional equivalent of dropping a barbell that's straining your muscles. Consider Marcus Aurelius facing repeated betrayals during the Antonine Plague. His journal reveals no fantasies of vengeance, only a resolve. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. By refusing to mirror the pettiness or cruelty of others, he preserved something far more valuable, his own integrity. Here's the practice that turns philosophy into action. Write a forgiveness letter, not one demanding apology or reconciliation, but a raw acknowledgement of the hurt followed by your conscious choice to let it go. Address it to the parent who failed you, the friend who ghosted you, even the younger version of yourself for mistakes you can't undo. Describe the pain honestly. Stoicism never asks you to lie about your wounds, then add this crucial line: I release this from my hands. The letter isn't for their absolution, it's for your emancipation. You might send it, burn it, or tuck it away, but the act of writing shifts the weight from their shoulders to your page. Try this reframe the next time resentment bubbles up. Imagine the person who wronged you as a passing storm cloud. Your anger is the effort to shout the cloud into changing shape. Forgiveness, that's the moment you stop yelling at the sky and simply step inside where it's dry. As Seneca observed, no one keeps faith with a creditor like the angry do with their grudges, paying compound interest on suffering long after the original debt was due. Your peace is too precious to mortgage to the past. Write the letter, drop the poison, walk free. The ancient Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus posed a question that cuts to the heart of every strained relationship. Are you holding someone, or are you holding onto them? There's a world of difference between the two. One is an open palm, the other a clenched fist. Think of a parent watching their child board the school bus for the first time. The love that waves goodbye through tears is stoic. The love that yanks the child back to delay the inevitable is attachment. Both feel like love, but only one respects the fundamental truth that every person we cherish is on loan to us, never a possession. This distinction transforms how we relate to everyone from aging parents to romantic partners. Attachment says, you must stay as you are for my comfort. Love says, I honor your right to grow, even if it takes you away from me. Musonius taught that true affection resembles sunlight. It warms without demanding anything in return. Contrast that with the suffocating grip of attachment, which functions more like a thermostat, constantly adjusting others to maintain our emotional temperature. Consider the mother who insists her adult child pursue a prestigious career path. Her protests of, I just want what's best for you, may cloak a deeper truth. She wants what's safest for her own identity as a successful parent. Stoicism doesn't condemn her care but asks her to examine its roots. Is her advice genuinely for her child's flourishing, or is it fear masquerading as love? The test comes when the child chooses differently. Does her support continue, or does it twist into guilt and manipulation? Romantic relationships reveal this even more starkly. Attachment mistakes jealousy for passion, control for commitment. Ever witnessed a couple where one monitors the other's texts or isolates them from friends? That's not love, it's insecurity in a three-piece suit. The Stoic alternative: loving like a gardener tending a plant, providing nourishment and space in equal measure, understanding that growth happens on the plant's terms, not the gardener's timetable. Here's the daily practice. When you feel tension rising in a relationship, your teenager resisting curfew, your partner taking a solo trip, pause and ask Musonius' question: am I loving or possessing? Notice where your concern crosses into claiming ownership over another's choices. True Stoic love has the courage to say, my happiness is not your obligation. It's the parent who funds their child's art degree despite preferring medicine. The partner who cheers when their significant other gets a job overseas, even though it means long distance. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally detached. The Stoics wept at funerals and reveled in friendship, but they also recognized that the deepest bonds are those free from invisible strings. Imagine holding a handful of sand squeezed too tight and it spills through your fingers. Open your palm and it remains. People are no different, the paradox. When we stop clutching relationships out of fear, we often find them resting more securely in our lives, not because we trapped them, but because they chose to stay. Marcus Aurelius left us a startling image that reshapes how we view conflicts. We're all fragments of the same universal body. Picture a human hand arguing with a foot over which is more essential, both blind to their shared purpose. This is the Stoic lens for relationships. Every person who irritates, disappoints, or wounds you is ultimately part of the same interconnected whole as you are. The coworker who takes credit for your idea, a fragment. The relative who always ruins holidays, another fragment. When you judge less and understand more, you're not being naive, you're aligning with a fundamental truth about human nature. Judgment comes easily. It's our brain's shortcut to make sense of others' behavior. But Stoicism asks us to trade that instinct for something far more transformative: curiosity. Consider how differently a disagreement unfolds when you replace "you're being selfish" with "help me see why this matters to you." The first statement slams a door, the second opens a window. Epictetus trained his students to approach conflicts like physicians diagnosing illness with detachment and a desire to uncover root causes rather than condemn symptoms. History gives us a profound example in Marcus Aurelius' treatment of his rival Avidius Cassius. When Cassius launched a rebellion to seize the throne, Marcus had every right to crush him with fury. Instead, he responded with grief rather than rage, writing, "This is a sickness of his mind, not a reflection of mine." He even ordered Cassius' family protected, knowing vengeance would only fracture the empire further. That's the power of understanding over judgment. It doesn't excuse harm, but it prevents us from compounding it. Here's your challenge this week. Pick one habitual criticism you levy against someone, your partner's forgetfulness, your boss's micromanaging, and dissolve it with curiosity. For the forgetful partner, what's overwhelming you right now that's making details slip? For the micromanager, what past experiences make hands-off leadership hard for you? You'll often uncover hidden fears or unhealed wounds driving their behavior. As Seneca noted, every cruel person is a wounded one first. This practice shines brightest in parenting. A teenager's slamming door might trigger a lecture about respect, but curiosity asks, what hurt are they carrying that needs this much force to contain? Judgment escalates conflicts, understanding disarms them. The Stoics weren't suggesting we tolerate toxicity. They urged clear boundaries, but they knew that labeling others as difficult rarely changes anything except our own agitation. Try this reframe next time someone frustrates you. Imagine their behavior as a telegram from their past, the co-worker who hoards information, possibly trained by previous betrayals. The friend who cancels last minute may be wrestling with unseen anxiety. This isn't about being a doormat. It's about becoming an archaeologist of human behavior, brushing away the dust of surface actions to reveal the artifacts beneath. Marcus Aurelius kept a nightly ritual of reviewing his day, not to catalogue others' faults, but to excavate his own reactions. When you wake at dawn, tell yourself, the people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil. Notice he doesn't say they choose to be awful. He frames their actions as ignorance, not malice. That subtle shift turns adversaries into students and judges into fellow travelers. The irony, understanding others often teaches us more about ourselves than them. That neighbor whose loud music drives you crazy, your irritation might reveal an unaddressed need for quiet creativity. The judgment we're so quick to aim outward usually circles back as a mirror. As Marcus wrote, The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When we choose curiosity over condemnation, we don't just transform relationships, we recolor our own minds. Seneca once wrote, "No easy path leads to greatness, a truth that stings when applied to relationships. We crave harmony, yet the moments that transform us are often the ones that make us squirm." Think of the last time someone gave you feedback that landed like a punch to the gut. Maybe a mentor said your leadership style feels dismissive, or your partner admitted your jokes sometimes mask real vulnerability. That initial sting, that's the friction where growth begins. The Stoics didn't just tolerate discomfort, they courted it like athletes training in bad weather, knowing ease weakens resilience. Consider the Roman general Scipio Africanus, who famously slept on a thin straw mat even after conquering Carthage. His logic, comfort dulls the mind. Apply that to relationships. When we avoid hard conversations to keep the peace, we're choosing the straw mattress over the sword. A CEO client of mine once received a brutal 360-degree review. Her team described her as brilliant but terrifying. She could have dismissed it as jealousy. Instead, she did something stoic. She sat with the discomfort, then asked each critic, "What one change would make you feel safe sharing ideas with me?" Within months, her team's innovation doubled. The friction became traction. Here's the practice. Pick one relationship where things feel stagnant. Now ask, what's the elephant in the room no one's naming? It might be your tendency to interrupt, your habit of withholding affection when stressed, or your passive-aggressive fine that shuts down dialogue. Then, and this is key, invite the discomfort. Tell your friend, "I think I dominate our talks. Call me out next time I steamroll you." Give your colleague permission to say, "That feedback face you're making right now." That's why people hesitate to be honest with you. The magic lies in reframing. Discomfort isn't a threat to relationships, it's the price of admission for deeper ones. Like a tree growing around a fence post, the resistance shapes stronger forms. Seneca observed slaves who'd endured hardship with more grace than their masters, writing, "Difficulty shows what men are." Your relationships will mirror that truth. The friend who points out your blind spots, they're not rude, they're rare. The partner who insists on addressing the tension you'd rather ignore. That's love wearing work gloves. So tonight, try this. Light a candle and write down one uncomfortable truth about how you show up in relationships. Not a vague, "I could communicate better," but surgical honesty. "I use sarcasm to deflect intimacy," or "I resent people for needing me." Then fold that paper and tuck it in your wallet. Every time you reach for cash, you'll feel it there. A quiet reminder that growth lives just past the point where comfort ends. As Seneca promised, the path to wisdom, rough at first but easy once you've walked it. Your relationships deserve that kind of courage. Epictetus observed that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen more and speak less. There's a quiet strength in this simple ratio, one that modern relationships often overlook. Think of the last heated argument you witnessed, perhaps 2 colleagues debating a project, voices rising, hands gesturing wildly. Now contrast that with someone who remains composed, answering pointed remarks with measured silence. Which presence commands more respect? Stoicism teaches that restraint isn't weakness, it's the ultimate leverage in human connection. The person who masters their tongue holds an invisible advantage. They reveal nothing until they choose to, and when they finally speak, the room leans in. History remembers the power of strategic silence. When Marcus Aurelius faced senators demanding harsher punishments for rebels, he simply walked to the window and watched birds circling the forum. His refusal to engage in their outrage forced them to confront their own bloodlust. Centuries later, Gandhi would use similar tactics during British negotiations, his prolonged silences stretching until colonial officials squirmed, revealing their true intentions. These weren't passive acts, they were psychological jiu-jitsu, using others' emotional momentum against them. Your daily interactions may not involve empires at stake, but the principle holds. Words poured recklessly lose value, while those measured out with intention gain weight. Consider how differently conflicts unfold when you replace rapid-fire retorts with purposeful pauses. A partner accuses you of neglecting chores. Instead of retaliating with a list of their failings, you let their words hang in the air for 3 full breaths. That silence does 2 things. It gives you space to separate reaction from response, and it unsettles their expectation of drama. Epictetus warned, if you pour a handful of filth into a clear spring, the water stops being fit to drink. Most relational damage happens not because of what was said, but because no one had the discipline to stop speaking. Here's the challenge. For 1 full day, practice intentional speech restraint. Before speaking, ask 3 questions. Is this necessary? Is it true? Does it improve upon silence? You'll quickly notice how much conversation is filler, nervous chatter, rehearsed opinions, unsolicited advice. But the real revelation comes in what happens when you stop feeding certain dynamics. The co-worker who baits you into office politics finds no willing opponent. The relative who thrives on drama meets only calm detachment. Like sunlight revealing dust in the air, your silence exposes the emptiness of many conflicts. Try this experiment during your next difficult conversation. When tensions rise, consciously slow your speech rate by half. Pause for 5 seconds before responding to charged statements. Watch how the other person's energy shifts when their words don't spark the expected reaction. As Seneca noted, sometimes even to live is an act of courage. In relationships, sometimes just to stay silent is an act of wisdom. Your quiet presence becomes a mirror, reflecting back the chaos others bring, and in that reflection, they often see themselves anew. Hierocles, a lesser-known but profoundly practical Stoic philosopher, gave us a visual tool that revolutionizes how we set boundaries, the concentric circles of concern. Picture a stone dropped in a pond. The ripples closest to the center are your immediate sphere, your health, your closest relationships. Each expanding ring represents wider connections, extended family, colleagues, community. The insight, we have limited energy, and pouring it indiscriminately into outer rings leaves the center parched. This isn't selfishness, it's stewardship. Your sister calls for the 3rd time this week, venting about her divorce. You listen, but notice your chest tightening, your work suffering. Hierocles would say, compassion doesn't require drowning with them. Throw the lifeline from shore. Take the guilt trip scenario so many face during holidays. Your mother sighs. If you don't come home this weekend, your grandfather will be heartbroken. The old script might have you canceling plans to appease her, but Stoic boundaries ask, which circle does this truly belong to? Your grandfather's emotions are his to manage. Your mother's disappointment is hers. Your circle, deciding what visit schedule honors both your family and your sanity. You might respond, I'll visit next weekend when I can be fully present, instead of surrendering to emotional blackmail. This isn't coldness, it's clarity that enables sustainable care. The modern world bombards us with demands masquerading as duties. A co-worker's last-minute request, a friend's constant crises, each tugs at our sleeves. But here's the paradox Hierocles uncovered. We actually give more to others when we stop giving away our core stability. Imagine your energy as a lantern. Held close, it illuminates your path and warms those nearest. Carried too far outward, its light dims for everyone. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as emperor rising before dawn to center himself through journaling before addressing Rome's endless petitions. He knew a depleted leader serves no one well. Where does this live in real life? Start small. That acquaintance who monopolizes your lunches with complaints gets a gentle but firm, "I've only got 30 minutes today, let's focus on what we can solve." The volunteer committee guilting you into overcommitting. Here's, "I'll handle the newsletter but can't lead the fundraiser." Each no to outer rings is a yes to what sustains you, and ultimately your capacity to give. As Seneca wrote to a friend overwhelmed by obligations, you must match time's swiftness with your speed in using it. Tonight, try mapping your own circles. Draw 3 rings on paper. In the center, list non-negotiables: sleep, key relationships, spiritual practice. The middle holds important but flexible commitments like fitness or mentoring. The outer ring, social media debates, others' emergencies, and shoulds imposed by others. Now audit 1 week's energy expenditure. Did trivia from the outer rings drain fuel from your core? Boundaries with kindness aren't walls, they're the art of tending your inner flame so you can warm others without burning out. The Stoic question lingers: will you let others determine where your light shines, or will you hold the lantern yourself? Marcus Aurelius began each dawn with a ritual as simple as it was revolutionary. Before his feet touched the floor, he'd whisper 3 things he was grateful for. Not grand, sweeping blessings, but the often overlooked textures of life. The warmth of sunlight through his window, the loyalty of an old friend, even the challenge of a difficult person who sharpened his patience like a whetstone on steel. This wasn't fluffy optimism, it was relational weight training. By anchoring his day in gratitude, he inoculated himself against the petty irritations that fray connections. Think of it as emotional hygiene, brushing away the plaque of resentment before it could harden into something more corrosive. Gratitude, in Stoic terms, isn't just a feeling, it's a discipline that rewires how we perceive others. Consider the last time someone held a door for you. Did you register it as their basic duty or as a small act of grace? That split-second framing changes everything. When Marcus wrote, "Take full account of what excellences you possess," he wasn't boasting, he was practicing the art of noticing. A spouse's steady hands making coffee every morning, a co-worker covering your shift without fanfare. These are the threads that weave relational durability. But here's the catch: gratitude untold is like a lamp hidden under a basket. Its light only reaches others when voiced. The science behind this astonishes even skeptics. Studies tracking couples who regularly express appreciation show something remarkable: their relationships weather conflicts better, not because fights disappear, but because the reservoir of goodwill buffers the blows. It's the Stoic principle of antifragility in action. Systems grow stronger when stressed, provided they're anchored in core strengths. Your partner's forgotten anniversary stings less when you've consciously noted their 100 uncelebrated acts of care. Here's the practice that turns philosophy into flesh. For 7 days, send 1 specific thank you text daily. Not generic "you're awesome" notes, but laser-focused acknowledgments. "The way you handled Miguel's complaint today was masterful. You turned a landmine into a lesson." Or, "I woke up to you taking the trash out without being asked." That's love in work boots. The specificity is key. It proves you're paying attention at a cellular level. Watch what happens. The barista who beams when you thank her for remembering your order starts greeting you by name. Your teenager, startled by praise for stacking dishes without prompting, might just do it again tomorrow. Gratitude operates like emotional compound interest: small, regular deposits accrue into relational wealth that outlast market crashes. Even in tension, that foundation of spoken appreciation becomes the bedrock you rebuild upon. Marcus didn't wait for perfect moments to give thanks. He cultivated them deliberately, like a gardener planting seeds between cracks in stone. Your turn. Reach for your phone, name that tiny, magnificent thing you almost missed, then hit send. Watch how the world leans in to meet your attention. Epictetus offered an image that cuts through the anxiety of modern relationships like a lightning strike: the archer. Picture a master bowman drawing back the string, aligning every muscle with precision, releasing the arrow with perfect form. Here's the Stoic twist: once that arrow leaves the bow, it's no longer his to control. Winds may divert it, a sudden movement might obstruct its path. The archer's excellence lies not in guaranteeing the hit, but in perfecting the shot. That's the essence of detachment, not indifference to outcomes, but liberation from the delusion that we ever controlled them in the first place. Now apply that to dating. You craft a thoughtful message, suggest a creative first date, wear the outfit that makes you feel confident. These are your arrows. Their response, that's the wind. Obsessing over whether they'll reply, analyzing their tone, rewriting your texts 3 times, that's not aiming well. That's chasing the arrow mid-flight. Epictetus would ask, did you do your part with integrity? Then the rest is not your burden. Rejection stings not because you missed the target, but because you mistook the target as something you could command. Here's where most stumble: we conflate effort with entitlement. Preparing a stellar presentation entitles you to your team's attention, not their agreement. Planning an anniversary weekend earns you the right to pride in your thoughtfulness, not a guarantee your partner will love every detail. The Stoic question to gut check yourself: what attachment here is causing my suffering? Is it the desire for a specific outcome, or the quiet shame of fearing you're not enough if things don't go your way? Consider a real-world test case. A man goes on 5 stellar dates with someone who then ghosts him. His suffering doesn't come from the rejection itself, it springs from the story he attaches to it. This proves I'm unlovable. The Stoic reframe: I showed up authentically. Their departure speaks to their readiness, not my worth. That shift from personalizing outcomes to honoring your own standards is the difference between heartbreak and resilience. Try this practice today. Identify one relationship where you're overly invested in the result: a job interview, a friend's approval, a parent's praise. Write down exactly what's within your control: preparation, honesty, effort, and what's not: their biases, moods, competing priorities. Then, and this is crucial, ritually release the second list. Say it aloud, burn the paper, toss it in a river. The physical act reinforces the mental shift. The irony: detachment often improves outcomes. Dates sense when you're not needy. Colleagues respect when you advocate without desperation. Even parenting becomes more joyful when you guide without demanding a particular future for your child. As Marcus Aurelius noted, the cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in your path, then go around them. That's all you need to know. The rest is commentary. Your arrows will land where they will. The mastery is in the drawing of the bow. Seneca warned of a dangerous trade-off many of us make daily: choosing the illusion of peace over the discomfort of truth. He wrote, "A harmony secured by silence is not true peace but suppressed war." Think of the last time you bit back honest feedback to avoid rocking the boat. Maybe you nodded along to a friend's questionable life choice, or swallowed frustrations with a partner's habit rather than risk an argument. That momentary relief comes at a steep cost. Every unspoken truth accumulates like plaque in the arteries of relationships, slowly restricting authentic connection until only hollow pleasantries remain. People-pleasing isn't kindness, it's a form of relational counterfeit currency. The co-worker who never hears your constructive criticism misses the chance to grow. The friend who assumes their hurtful jokes land well because no one object continues alienating others. Even worse, the resentment that festers beneath your polished smile eventually leaks out sideways in passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, or explosive outbursts over trivial matters. Stoicism reframes this dilemma with surgical clarity. Honesty isn't the enemy of care, it's the foundation of real intimacy. As Epictetus put it, better to trip with the feet than with the tongue. Yet we spend so much energy avoiding verbal stumbles that we forget standing still gets us nowhere. Consider a client of mine, a gifted teacher whose students adored her, but whose colleagues secretly resented her constant yes to extra duties that left her exhausted and resentful. Her breakthrough came when she realized her people-pleasing wasn't generosity. It was fear masquerading as virtue. By shielding others from her honest no, she robbed them of the chance to collaborate fairly. The Stoic distinction here is vital. We're not responsible for others' reactions to our boundaries, only for delivering them with respect. Here's your challenge, the crucible where theory becomes transformation. This week, initiate one conversation you've been avoiding, not with dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Tell your roommate their late-night guitar practice disrupts your sleep. Explain to your parent that their unsolicited parenting advice feels undermining. The formula is simple. State facts without accusation, express your feelings without blame, and propose solutions without demands. When X happens, I feel Y. What I'd like is Z. The aftermath may surprise you. That explosive conflict you feared often proves a mirage. Most people respect courage when it's paired with care. And if they don't, their discomfort isn't your burden to manage. As Seneca observed, truth will offend either now or later, but the later it comes, the heavier the price. Better the sharp pain of honest discord than the slow poison of false peace. Your relationships deserve more than polite fiction. They're strong enough to weather reality. Marcus Aurelius often gazed at the night sky before making decisions, not for astrological guidance, but to anchor himself in what he called the view from above. Picture Earth from space, a fragile blue marble where every war, every heartbreak, every moment of joy unfolds on a speck smaller than a grain of sand. That's the cosmic perspective, the visceral reminder that the person cutting you off in traffic, the coworker who snapped at you, even the relative who always pushes your buttons, are fellow travelers on this tiny rock, each wrestling with invisible battles. Stoicism doesn't ask us to minimize our struggles, but to contextualize them within the shared human experience. Road rage offers the perfect laboratory for this practice. When someone swerves into your lane without signaling, the immediate script writes itself there reckless, entitled, "A Menace." But what if you could flick a switch and see their dashboard camera footage from the past hour? Maybe they're rushing to a hospital after a call about their child's accident. Perhaps they just lost their job and are drowning in panic. This isn't about excusing dangerous driving, but recognizing that most villains in our daily stories are protagonists in their own flawed, frightened, and fighting battles we can't see. The Stoic exercise here is disarmingly simple yet profound. Before reacting to someone's behavior, ask, how would I treat this person if I knew their pain? That barrister who messed up your order might be nursing a migraine while covering a double shift. The friend who forgot your birthday could be slipping into depression. Marcus wrote in his Meditations, when people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it. Once you understand, you'll feel compassion rather than outrage. History gives us a striking example in Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. When a drunk stranger assaulted him in Athens, Zeno didn't retaliate or even protest. Afterward, he told his students, The man wasn't attacking me, he was attacking his own shadow. That shift from personalizing others' actions to seeing them as symptoms of inner turmoil changes everything. It doesn't mean tolerating abuse, but it does mean refusing to let someone else's chaos dictate your peace. Try this reframe today. The next time someone irritates you, a neighbor's loud music, a colleague's condescension, pause and mentally draft their biography. What losses might explain their sharp edges? What fears drive their behavior? You don't need to excuse their actions to soften your reaction. As Epictetus observed, every person is not just living their life, they're arguing for it. The rude customer isn't trying to ruin your day. They're screaming into the void, hoping someone will hear their pain. The cosmic perspective isn't about becoming a doormat. It's about wielding discernment without venom. You can still report the negligent driver, set boundaries with the toxic friend, or walk away from the shouting match. But you'll do it with the quiet certainty of someone who knows that cruelty is often just misdirected suffering in disguise. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire with this mindset, writing, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Not because the offender deserves mercy, but because you deserve freedom from their emotional turbulence. Here's the ultimate test. When you're lying awake tonight replaying an encounter where someone wronged you, shift the narrative. Imagine them as a child, scared, hopeful, vulnerable. Picture the wounds they carry and the armor they've built. Does your anger soften? That's the cosmic perspective at work, not erasing justice, but infusing it with humanity. The Stoics believed we're all fragments of the same universal fire. When we forget that, we burn each other. When we remember, we light the way. Cato the Younger, the Stoic statesman who stood unshaken as Rome's republic crumbled around him, embodied a truth modern relationships desperately need. Patience isn't passivity, it's power in reserve. While senators screamed insults, Cato would simply continue reading his scroll, unfazed. When rivals spread vicious rumors, he responded with silence so profound it unnerved them more than any counterattack. This wasn't indifference, it was emotional jiu-jitsu, using the weight of others' impulsiveness to throw them off balance. In an age where instant reactions are glorified, quick texts, snappy comebacks, heated tweets, Cato's restraint seems almost revolutionary. But here's what history confirms. Those who master the pause ultimately steer the conversation. Consider how differently conflicts unfold when you insert just 10 seconds of deliberate silence. A partner accuses you of being distant. The old script might have you retaliating with their own flaws. Well, you're suffocating. But the Stoic pause creates space for something far more potent. In that brief stillness, three things happen. Your nervous system resets, your higher cognition engages, and the other person's words actually land instead of bouncing off your defenses. What emerges isn't the reaction they expected, but a response that shifts the entire dynamic. I hear that you're feeling disconnected. Help me understand what you need. That's not weakness, that's strategic strength. Impulsiveness tricks us into believing speed equals control. The faster we reply, the more we feel we're directing the interaction. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. Epictetus compared thoughtless speech to vomiting. Once it's out, you can't take it back. Ancient Rome had no delete key for scrolls, just as we can't unsend texts written in anger. The difference between a cutting remark and a clarifying question often hinges on those 10 seconds Cato modeled. A CEO client of mine installed this practice before contentious meetings. Instead of immediately countering criticisms, she'd slowly sip water, counting silently. The result, colleagues began prefacing their own remarks with, "Let me think about that," transforming debates into dialogue. Here's how to cultivate this discipline. Start small. When someone offers unsolicited advice, "You should really try this diet," resist the urge to deflect or justify. Let their words hang in the air while you take 2 deep breaths. Notice how the tension diffuses when you finally respond with, "I'll consider that," instead of reflexive pushback. Gradually expand this to heated moments. Your sibling mocks your life choices. Before firing back, step away, literally if needed, to ask, "Will my reaction improve this relationship or just my ego?" As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to calmness, the closer he is to strength." The magic lies in what flourishes in that pause. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so do human interactions. When you don't fill the silence immediately, something remarkable often happens. The other person reveals more. They backtrack, clarify, or even apologize, simply because you didn't rush to meet their energy. Like a judo master using an opponent's momentum, patience lets others' harsh words exhaust themselves against your stillness. Cato knew this when Julius Caesar, frustrated by his unflinching composure, famously shouted, "I resent your contempt." To which Cato merely raised an eyebrow. Centuries later, we remember not Caesar's rage, but the man who refused to mirror it. Tonight, try this experiment. Place a sticky note where you'll see it tomorrow. 10 seconds is all it takes. Then watch that colleague who nitpicks your report. Pause, and you might hear the insecurity beneath their critique. The child testing boundaries. Your delayed response could reveal their need for reassurance rather than rebellion. Patience isn't about tolerating toxicity. It's the space where clarity replaces chaos, where reactions become responses, and where true strength isn't measured in decibels but in depth. As the Stoics taught, you can't control the storm, but you can always anchor in the pause. Seneca once observed a cracked amphora in the marketplace, its jagged lines catching the morning light, and saw not a flawed vessel, but nature's quiet rebellion against human perfectionism. "The world itself bears wrinkles and scars," he wrote, "yet we demand our relationships arrive polished smooth as marble." This tension between expectation and reality plays out painfully in our closest bonds. The parent who berates themselves for losing patience during a toddler's tantrum, the partner cataloging every missed anniversary while overlooking years of quiet devotion. These aren't failures of love, but of perspective. Stoicism invites us to trade the brittle ideal of perfection for something far more durable, the art of loving what is. Consider the parenting industry's unspoken narrative that if you just follow the right method, your child will emerge polite, precocious, and perfectly adjusted. But nature mocks such hubris. A mother I know spent months agonizing over her son's refusal to read at grade level until a Stoic friend asked, "What if his struggle isn't your failure, but his unique path?" The question reframed everything. She began noticing his uncanny ability to resolve playground conflicts, a skill no parenting manual had prioritized. Seneca would nod knowingly. No excellent thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. Yet we judge relationships by their unripe stages, discarding what could mature into unexpected sweetness. Marriage exposes this even more starkly. The myth of the perfect partner sets couples up for perpetual disappointment. You fell for their spontaneity, then resent their lack of planning. Their meticulous nature, once reassuring, now feels controlling. Stoicism proposes a radical alternative. See these not as flaws to fix, but as complementary strengths waiting to balance your own rough edges. Marcus Aurelius modeled this with his wife Faustina. History remembers her alleged infidelities, but his meditations reveal a man who chose to focus on her warmth and wit rather than demanding moral perfection. The practice begins with a simple but confronting question: where am I demanding the impossible from others? That colleague who never meets your exacting standards, what if their slower pace fosters deeper analysis? The friend who forgets birthdays but shows up in crises. Must they conform to your love language to prove their care? Perfectionism in relationships functions like a distorting mirror. It reflects back not reality, but our own unhealed insecurities. We police others' behaviors to quiet the voice whispering, "Am I enough?" Try this reframe today. Pick one person you've judged harshly for falling short of your expectations. Now list 3 ways their supposed flaws might serve an unseen purpose. The impatient coworker drives projects to completion. The messy sibling sparks spontaneous joy. Even betrayal, when examined without defensiveness, can reveal where we outsourced our self-worth. Nature's genius lies in its imperfections. Crooked trees withstand storms, straight ones snap under. Your relationships need not be flawless to be fortresses. As Seneca watched workers mend that cracked amphora with gold, a practice called kintsugi, he saw the deeper metaphor. What we deem broken can become more beautiful for having been repaired. Every fracture in your relationships holds that potential. The question isn't whether others will disappoint you. They will, but whether you'll interpret those disappointments as cracks to condemn or seams to gild with understanding. The Japanese artisans knew sometimes the light shines brightest through the breaks. Marcus Aurelius left us a weapon against anger so practical it fits on a single scroll, his private journaling ritual for rage. Picture the emperor, fresh from a council meeting where advisors questioned his decisions, sitting alone with wax tablet in hand. Instead of summoning guards to punish dissent, he wrote 3 brutal questions. What part of this is within my control? What story am I telling myself about their motives? And how would my best self respond? This wasn't passive reflection. It was emotional alchemy, transforming molten fury into measured action. The brilliance lies in its simplicity. By forcing anger through the narrow funnel of written words, you expose its distortions before they escape as regret. Think of anger like a traffic jam. Your body's the idling car, engine overheating, horn blaring, going nowhere. Journaling is the act of shifting into neutral, cutting the ignition, and studying the map for alternate routes. The driver who screams at congestion only strains their own throat, while the one who breathes and reroutes arrives faster with dignity intact. Marcus knew this. When senators spread rumors about his wife, he didn't confront them immediately. He wrote first, unraveling his own assumptions until he reached this realization. They act from ignorance, not malice. My response will teach them how an emperor and a man behaves. Here's how to wield this tool. Next time anger flares, whether from a partner's careless remark or a stranger's rude gesture, reach for paper before your voice. Set a timer for 5 minutes and answer Marcus' trio. First, separate what happened from your interpretation. She ignored my text is fact. She's disrespecting me is fiction. Second, identify the tiniest actionable piece. You can't control their behavior, but you can craft a calm question instead of an accusation. Third, project forward. How will this incident look in a week? A year. Most volcanic anger cools when exposed to the oxygen of perspective. The magic lies in the delay between spark and speech. Neuroscience confirms what Marcus intuited. Writing engages the prefrontal cortex, dampening the amygdala's fire alarm. One CEO client keeps a rage log in her desk drawer. After a disastrous board meeting where investors dismissed her proposal, she scrawled, "They're dinosaurs afraid of change." The act of writing it exposed the hyperbole. By the time she addressed them again, her revised pitch acknowledged their risk aversion while showcasing data, earning their approval. Tonight, prepare your anger toolkit. Place a notebook where tension finds you: your bedside, your car console, your work bag. Label it first draft reactions. Because that's all raw anger is, a rough draft of emotions begging for revision. Marcus didn't eliminate anger, he made it work for him rather than against him. Your pen can be the valve that releases pressure before the boiler explodes. Write hot, edit cold, and watch how relationships transform when your words become bridges instead of battering rams. Epictetus compared the mind to a cup of wine constantly refilled with the opinions and energies of others until it overflows, leaving no space for its own essence. His solution, the art of strategic retreat, what he called returning to yourself. This isn't avoidance or disconnection. It's the deliberate practice of creating empty space where your thoughts can settle like sediment in water, separating what's yours from what you've absorbed. Modern life bombards us with relational demands, endless notifications, back-to-back meetings, the expectation to be perpetually on. But Stoicism recognizes what neuroscience now confirms. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's the forge where clarity is hammered out. Think of the last time you felt socially exhausted, maybe after a weekend of non-stop gatherings where you laughed at jokes that didn't land, nodded through conversations that drained you, and came home feeling like a stranger to yourself. That hollow sensation isn't a flaw, it's your soul signaling it's time to retreat. The Stoics didn't wait for burnout to force their hand. They scheduled solitude like we schedule meetings, understanding that every relationship, no matter how loving, requires pauses to breathe. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, began each dawn with hours of solitary journaling. Seneca would take multi-day walks without companions, writing, "I divorce myself from the crowd to better serve them." Here's the litmus test. What interaction leaves you feeling fractured rather than fueled? It might be the friend whose crises always eclipse your joys, the co-worker who confuses collaboration with constant chatter, or even the family member who mistakes proximity for permission to disregard boundaries. Retreat isn't rejection, it's recalibration. One executive client realized her Sunday hikes alone weren't escapism. They were the necessary counterbalance to her public-facing role. "Those quiet hours," she said, "let me return to work as my best self, not a resentful version of myself." The practice is simpler than we imagine. Start with micro-retreats, a morning coffee savored in silence before the household wakes, a lunch break spent walking without podcasts or calls. Gradually expand to what Epictetus called the inner citadel, a mental space no external demand can breach. When tensions rise during a debate, excuse yourself to the restroom and take 3 breaths. When a loved one's needs feel overwhelming, say, "I need an hour to gather my thoughts, I'll be fully present after." These pauses aren't selfish, they're the pauses between musical notes that make the melody discernible. History offers a quiet hero in Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers, who famously retreated to her seaside villa for months each year while raising Rome's most influential reformers. Critics called it neglect, her sons called it the source of her legendary wisdom. She understood what we often forget: you can't pour from an empty cup. The people who rely on you don't need a martyr, they need someone who's preserved their inner light. Tonight, ask Epictetus' question: which relationship is currently clouding my cup? Not to condemn it, but to identify where temporary space might restore its vitality. Then act not with drama, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knows that even the deepest love sometimes needs room to breathe. The ocean isn't diminished by the tide's retreat, it's made eternal by it. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who shaped Epictetus, watched Rome's elite crumble under the weight of their own vanity and left us a warning sharper than any sword. Praise is like salt, necessary for life, but deadly in excess. Think of the last time you witnessed someone intoxicated by constant flattery, the artist who believes their own hype, the executive blind to their team's contributions, or even the child rewarded for mere participation rather than effort. Stoicism draws a vital line between recognition that elevates and adulation that corrupts. The difference lies not in the words themselves, but in their anchor point. Flattery praises traits, genuine recognition praises choices. Consider two versions of the same compliment. "You're so talented" strokes the ego but risks breeding complacency. Contrast that with "your dedication to daily practice really shows in how you handled that challenge." This ties praise to action, something within the recipient's control. The first is like candy, giving a quick high but no sustenance. The second is protein, fueling growth. History offers a cautionary tale in Emperor Nero, whose courtiers fed him endless praise until he believed himself a god, with disastrous consequences. Meanwhile, Marcus Aurelius' tutor would praise him not for his royal status, but for returning a borrowed book on time. That's the Stoic secret: praise the virtues, not the vanity. Flattery's danger lies in its transactional nature. It often says more about the giver's agenda than the recipient's worth. The colleague who gushes over your presentation while secretly angling for a favor, the parent who calls their child perfect to avoid tough conversations. These aren't kindnesses, they're emotional counterfeit currency. Seneca saw through this, writing, "The mob's cheers mean nothing. They'd cheer your execution with the same breath." True recognition, by contrast, requires courageous attention. It means noticing the quiet discipline behind someone's success, or naming the resilience in their struggle. Here's your task today: give one compliment anchored in observable virtue. To your barrister, "I admire how you remember everyone's orders." That's real presence. To your partner, "The way you stayed calm during that argument showed incredible self-mastery." To your child, "You didn't give up on that math problem." That's perseverance. This practice trains your eye to spot effort, over Chinese letter, and teaches others to value what they can replicate. The ripple effects astonish. A manager who shifted from "great job" to "your thorough research" made that proposal bulletproof, saw her team's quality soar. Why specific virtue-based praise doesn't just validate, it illuminates the path forward. Like a gardener pointing out which buds will bear fruit, it helps people cultivate their best selves. Musonius was right: salt enhances when measured, but drowns when poured without thought. Your words can either polish a mirror or plant a seed. Choose wisely. Heraclitus, the ancient philosopher who watched the same river never flow twice, gave Stoicism one of its most liberating and unsettling truths. Change isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Every relationship you have today, from your closest confidant to the coworker you barely notice, exists in a state of quiet flux. The friend who once finished your sentences now sends brief replies. The mentor whose advice shaped your career suddenly feels out of touch. These shifts aren't failures, they're the universe enforcing its oldest law. Stoicism takes this further. Suffering arises not from change itself, but from our white-knuckled grip on what was. Consider friendship's natural seasons. Childhood bonds woven over scraped knees and summer bikes often unravel when careers and families diverge. A college roommate who knew your midnight fears might now feel like a stranger at reunions. The instinct is to blame ourselves for growing apart, or them for changing. But what if this drift isn't tragic? What if it's as natural as leaves releasing from trees in autumn? Marcus Aurelius meditated on this daily, writing, "Frightened of change." But what can exist without it? That tightness in your chest when scrolling through an old friend's unfamiliar photos. That's not loss, it's life moving forward according to plan. Here's the practice that turns philosophy into freedom. When you feel resistance to a relationship's evolution, a sibling becoming distant, a colleague moving on, ask Heraclitus' question: am I fighting a tide that's meant to recede? Not every connection is meant to last forever. Some exist to deposit wisdom or joy at specific crossroads. The neighbor who taught you to garden before moving away, the gym buddy who pushed you through a rough patch, their value wasn't diminished because the chapter ended. Even marriages sometimes complete their purpose not until death do us part, but in mutual growth that eventually points in different directions. History offers a poignant example in Seneca's letters to his friend Lucilius. As Seneca aged and Lucilius' political career flourished, their correspondence changed, less frequent, more distilled. Yet Seneca reframed this not as decline but refinement. Does the river mourn when it narrows at the delta? It's simply becoming what it must next be. Modern research echoes this. Studies on friendship decay show most adult relationships naturally transition about every 7 years, not from lack of care, but because we ourselves aren't static. The person who needed a wild confidant at 25 might crave a grounded listener at 40. Try this reframe today. Pick one relationship that feels strained, not due to conflict but simple drift. Instead of forcing nostalgic reunions or guilt-tripping over unanswered texts, honor what it gave you. Light a candle and name 3 gifts it brought. Maybe they introduced you to your favorite book or modeled resilience during your divorce. Then whisper Heraclitus' truth, all flows, and feel the relief when you stop demanding permanence from a universe built on transformation. The irony. Some relationships deepen precisely because we release them from the burden of forever. The childhood friend you see every 5 years might offer clearer mirrors than daily acquaintances because you've allowed each other the space to evolve. Like trees growing side by side but at different rates, relationships thrive when we accept that roots can stay tangled even as branches reach for separate sunlight. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. Your connections aren't failing, they're flowing. The question is whether you'll fight the current or let it carry you to new shores. Cleans, the second leader of Stoicism after Zeno, had a teaching method so radical his students called it philosophy without words. While other schools lectured endlessly about virtue, Clean simply rose before dawn each day to draw water from the well, tend his garden, and live with unshakable integrity. His message was clear: wisdom isn't transmitted through speeches, but through the quiet power of consistent action. 2,000 years later, neuroscience confirms what this Stoic master knew. Mirror neurons in our brains wire us to imitate what we observe far more than what we're told. Every interaction is an invitation not to demand change from others, but to embody the change we wish to see. Parenting lays this truth bare. A father who yells, "Stop shouting," teaches volume, not calm. A mother scrolling through her phone while preaching about moderation sends mixed signals no lecture can untangle, but the inverse holds transformative power. One client, frustrated by her teenager's disrespect, began modeling the behavior she desired, knocking before entering his room, listening without interrupting, even saying, "Thank you" for small courtesies. Within weeks, without a single confrontation, his tone began mirroring hers. As Cleans demonstrated by carrying water buckets into old age, leadership isn't about having followers. It's about walking a path so compelling others choose to join. The workplace amplifies this principle. Studies on psychological safety reveal teams unconsciously adopt the communication patterns of their leaders, not their memos. A manager advocating for work-life balance while answering emails at midnight creates cognitive dissonance no policy can resolve. Contrast this with a CEO who publicly blocks her calendar for school plays, or a chef who washes dishes alongside his staff. Their actions don't just instruct, they give implicit permission for others to follow suit. Ancient Rome saw this when Cato the Younger, known for his frugality, noticed senators suddenly wearing plain tunics and dismissing lavish banquets. No edict was issued. His living example became the new standard. Here's the challenge that turns philosophy into transformation. Identify one behavior you've criticized in others, perhaps a partner's distracted listening, a colleague's negativity, or a child's avoidance of chores. For 7 days, become the living antidote. If impatience bothers you, consciously add 3 seconds of pause before responding. If you resent others' complaints, verbalize 3 genuine appreciations daily. The key lies in absolute consistency, not to manipulate change, but because integrity requires no audience. History offers a quiet hero in Portia Cotto, daughter of the famous Stoic. When her husband Brutus conspired against Caesar, she didn't deliver speeches about bravery. Instead, she deliberately stabbed her thigh to prove she could withstand pain and keep secrets. Extreme, perhaps, but her lesson endures. Conviction shown eclipses conviction spoken. Your life is your loudest manifesto. Every choice whispers to those around you. This is how humans ought to be. When words and actions align, the world begins to mirror back the change you've already become. Epictetus drew a line that changes everything. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Think about the last time someone betrayed you, maybe a friend who shared your secret, a partner who broke a promise, or a colleague who took credit for your work. The initial sting was real, like a knife sliding between your ribs, but what happened next, that's where the Stoic choice lies. Did you let the wound breathe, or did you keep tearing off the scab by replaying the moment, imagining vengeful scenarios, or telling yourself, "I'll never trust again"? The betrayal itself was a single act. The suffering, that's the story you've been writing ever since. Consider Julia, who discovered her business partner had siphoned funds for years. The financial loss was painful, but what nearly destroyed her was the endless loop of "how could I be so stupid?" and "everyone will think I'm a fool." Months later, the money was gone, but her real poverty was the mental energy spent feeding those thoughts. Then she stumbled on Epictetus' distinction. The theft wasn't her choice, the self-flagellation was. So she tried an experiment. For every hour spent dwelling on the betrayal, she'd match it with conscious reflection on lessons learned, tighter contracts, sharper intuition, gratitude for employees who stayed loyal. The pain didn't vanish, but its grip loosened. Here's the practice that turns insight into action. Pick one past hurt that still echoes a parent's harsh words, a lover's abrupt departure, a friend's silence when you needed them most. Now grab a journal and divide the page into 2 columns. On the left, write the bare facts: who, what, when. No interpretations, just forensic details. On the right, list every thought you've added since. The "they always," the "I should have," the "this proves." That right column, that's your suffering manifesto. The space between the columns is where your power lies. History offers a masterclass in this through Seneca's exile. Banished to Corsica on false charges, he could have wallowed in "why me?" Instead, he wrote, "A wise person considers not what was done to them, but what they do with it." His letters from that rocky island became timeless works of philosophy. The betrayal didn't define him, his response did. Your painful experiences are no different. The colleague who undermined you could be the catalyst for learning office politics. The friend's abandonment might teach you to value reciprocity. Even the deepest cuts become teachers when you stop dressing them in victimhood. Tonight, try this reframe. Light a candle and name the hurt aloud, then ask, what story have I been feeding this? If it were a campfire, would you keep tossing logs onto the flames or let the embers fade? Pain is the fire, suffering is the hand holding the fuel. As Epictetus reminds us, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. The knife was theirs, the healing, that's your territory, walk it like a sovereign. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a truth in his private journals that modern science would later confirm. Small acts of kindness compound like interest in the bank of human connection. What's not worth doing, he wrote, isn't worth doing well. At first glance, it sounds like a call to prioritize the monumental over the mundane. But the emperor meant the opposite. If an action is worth doing at all, do it with full presence, because even the tiniest gestures ripple outward in ways we can't always trace. Think of the last time someone surprised you with an unrequested kindness, the neighbor who shoveled your walk after a snowstorm, the co-worker who left a sticky note on your desk saying, "Your presentation inspired me." These weren't grand sacrifices, yet their warmth lingered far longer than the effort required. Consider the forgotten birthday scenario, a classic relational hiccup. The traditional response involves wounded silence or passive-aggressive hints, but Stoicism offers a more creative pivot. Instead of tallying grievances, you bake their favorite dessert anyway, not as a guilt trip, but as a quiet testament to how you choose to show up. No fanfare, no, look what I did despite you forgetting. The act stands on its own, a small stone dropped into the pond of your relationship. Here's the magic: when kindness is divorced from expectation, it becomes contagious. Your partner might not suddenly remember every anniversary, but they'll start mimicking your thoughtfulness in unexpected ways, filling your gas tank when you're running late, or saving the last piece of chocolate for you. The science behind this is startling. Researchers at UCLA found that witnessing acts of kindness triggers the same neurological reward centers as receiving them. This means your quiet decision to wash dishes without being asked doesn't just lighten a chore load, it subtly rewires the emotional climate of your home. Marcus understood this when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one, not through dramatic declarations, but through the daily drip of considerate actions." Your challenge today is surgical in its simplicity. Identify one relational chore that typically sparks resentment, maybe sorting the mail no one else touches, or refilling the printer paper at work, and perform it with detached generosity. Not for praise, not even for reciprocation, but as a private exercise in redefining what constitutes worthwhile effort. The key lies in the mental framing. Instead of thinking, "Why am I always the one doing this?" try, "This is my offering to the ecosystem we share." History gives us an unlikely model in Zeno's student Cleans. While other philosophers debated grand theories, he supported himself by hauling water at night, not as a martyr, but as a living demonstration that wisdom thrives in humble containers. Your unnoticed acts are those water buckets, each one carrying the weight of your values. When you stop keeping score, an alchemy occurs. The printer paper you replenish today might inspire a junior colleague to stay late helping you tomorrow. The coffee you brew without complaint could become the reason your teenager opens up about their struggles over breakfast. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his journal brims with reverence for microscopic virtues, the way sunlight gilds a bowl of fruit, the dignity of a well-tied sandal. He knew that civilizations aren't held together by occasional grand gestures, but by the invisible web of small civilities. Your relationships are no different. The truest test of character isn't how you behave when applause is guaranteed, but what you do when no one is watching, and how freely you let those actions go, like seeds scattered without insistence on knowing where they'll take root. Seneca watched a senator gloat after winning a debate, chest puffed, voice booming with vindication, and later wrote, "That man didn't conquer his opponent, he was conquered by his own need to conquer." There's a hidden tax on always being right. the erosion of connection. Think of your last argument where you knew you had the superior point. Maybe it was about politics over dinner, or whose fault it was the project missed its deadline. The facts were on your side, your logic was airtight, but as your "I told you so" hung in the air, did you notice how the room's warmth drained away? That's the moment Seneca would call the fork in the road. Your ego's triumph is often your relationship's defeat. History gives us a masterclass in this through the clash between Cato the Younger and Julius Caesar. Cato's relentless moral absolutism, his refusal to bend even when compromise could have saved Rome's republic, made him right in the history books, but at what cost? His rigidity alienated potential allies, turning what could have been a united front against Caesar's ambitions into a fractured opposition. Contrast that with Seneca's approach to disagreements. Dispute as if you're right, listen as if you're wrong. Not because truth doesn't matter, but because truth without trust is a hollow victory. Here's the litmus test for your next conflict. Before delivering that killing blow of irrefutable evidence, pause and ask Seneca's question: will being right here nourish or wither this connection? A husband proved his wife wrong about the fastest route home, might shave 5 minutes off their drive, but at the expense of her feeling belittled. A manager who triumphantly exposes a subordinate's error in a meeting might cement their authority, but erode the team's psychological safety. Humility in disputes isn't about surrendering truth. It's about packaging it so the other person can swallow it without choking on their pride. Try this reframe in real time. The next time someone insists 2 + 2 = 5, resist the urge to blast them with arithmetic. Instead, channel Seneca's soft correction. "I used to think that too. Then I noticed," or "that's an interesting take, help me understand how you got there." These aren't manipulative tactics, they're relational bridges. The goal isn't to win, but to create conditions where the other person lowers their defenses enough to consider your perspective. The workplace reveals this principle's power. A tech CEO told me how she resisted saying, "I warned you," when her team's rushed product failed. Instead, she said, "We all wanted this to work, let's autopsy it without blame." The result, her team voluntarily admitted, "You were right about the risks," and their trust in her leadership deepened. That's the paradox Seneca uncovered. When you stop insisting on being recognized as right, people often see your rightness more clearly. Ego clings to credit like a child to a toy. "See, my idea was better," connection whispers. Our collective wisdom grows when we all feel safe to contribute. The Stoics didn't advocate false modesty. They practiced something far more radical, judging their arguments by how much they improved the listener, not how brilliantly they showcased the speaker. Your next "I told you so" moment is a choice, a fleeting dopamine hit of superiority, or the slow release nourishment of a bond strengthened. As Seneca reminded us, we are members of one great body. Severing a vein to prove it bleeds is poor anatomy. The wiser physician heals without leaving scars. There's a hidden curriculum in every relationship that didn't turn out the way you hoped, the one that ended in silence instead of closure, the friendship that unraveled over a misunderstanding, even the workplace alliance that soured despite your best efforts. Stoicism whispers a counterintuitive truth about these so-called failures. They're not dead ends, but detours directing you toward unanticipated growth. Ammer, the love of fate isn't just about accepting disappointment. It's about recognizing that what feels like an interruption might actually be the main lesson. Consider the story of a woman who poured years into a relationship with a partner who refused to commit. When it finally collapsed, she journaled through the raw aftermath with stoic questioning. What did this experience reveal about my own boundaries? Where did I confuse patience with self-betrayal? Months later, those insights became the foundation for her next relationship, one where she spoke needs early, walked away at the first sign of dismissal, and ultimately found a love that required no negotiation of her worth. The failed relationship wasn't a mistake. It was the apprenticeship she needed to recognize and demand better. Marcus Aurelius framed this as digging for gold in the mud of experience. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Long-term growth in relationships operates like compound interest. You don't see the dividends in the moment, only in retrospect. A client of mine spent a decade resenting his father's emotional distance until he began framing their strained dynamic as preparation for his own parenting journey. His silence taught me the cost of withheld warmth, he realized. Now when I tuck my daughter in, I over-explain my love because I know how absence echoes. What seemed like a deficit became his most poignant guide. This is the alchemy of trusting the process, extracting wisdom from wounds so they transform into maps rather than scars. Try this reframe today. Pick one past relationship that still tastes bitter, not the fresh wounds, but the ones that linger like old bruises. Ask it Seneca's question, what's this phase preparing me for? The college roommate who betrayed your confidence might have been the catalyst for your now exceptional judge of character. The boss who took credit for your ideas could have been the necessary push toward your entrepreneurial leap. Even the fleeting romance that shattered your heart might have been the universe's way of clearing space for a love that wouldn't require you to shrink. History offers a quiet testament in the letters between Seneca and his friend Lucilius. When Lucilius lamented a broken political alliance, Seneca didn't offer platitudes. He pointed to the olive tree, how farmers deliberately crack its roots to force them deeper, making the tree unshakable in storms. Your most painful relational fractures operate the same way. That friend who walked away when you set boundaries, their departure deepened your roots into self-respect. The partner who couldn't match your vulnerability. Their limitations taught you to recognize emotional availability when it finally appeared. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, not to dwell on worst-case scenarios, but to rehearse their resilience. Apply this to your relational journey. Imagine yourself 5 years from now, looking back on your current struggles. What invisible threads might you see connecting this moment to a future strength? The anxiety you're feeling about a fledgling friendship could be training you in discernment. The conflict with your sibling might be refining your communication for a future partnership. Ammer asks you to trust the unfolding even when the pattern isn't visible yet. Like a tapestry viewed from the wrong side, all loose threads and chaos until the final flip reveals the design. Here's the daily practice. Each evening, light a candle and name one relational challenge, big or small. Then speak aloud. This is preparing me for. Some days you'll fill the blank easily, a tough conversation honing your courage, a disappointment teaching detachment. Other times you'll sit in the unknown, and that's okay. The act of asking the question tunes your mind to spot the lessons instead of just the losses. As Marcus wrote while leading Rome through plague and war, the blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it. Your relationships, even the ones that burned, are fuel for a light you can't yet see. Trust the process enough to keep gathering the kindling. Imagine waking up to a mind as clear as a mountain lake, no residue from yesterday's frustrations, no simmering resentments clouding your vision. That's the promise of emotional hygiene, the Stoic practice of daily mental decluttering. Just as you wouldn't leave dirty dishes piled up for weeks, your emotions deserve the same regular upkeep. The ancient Stoics called this their evening review, a ritual where they'd mentally sift through the day's events, examining what stirred their peace and why. But in our modern world, there's a new form of emotional grime that Seneca never faced: the corrosive drip of social media envy. Scroll through any platform, and you'll witness a highlight reel of impossible standards: friends celebrating promotions you didn't get, influencers flaunting relationships that seem flawless, acquaintances traveling to places you can't afford. Each swipe deposits microscopic barbs of comparison, leaving you feeling inadequate without understanding why. The Stoic antidote isn't quitting technology altogether, but applying the discipline of assent, interrogating those envy pangs before they take root. When you catch yourself thinking, "Their life looks perfect," pause and ask, "What facts do I actually have? What's the hidden cost of what they're showing?" That couple grinning in sunset photos might be ignoring their screaming toddler off camera. The colleague's promotion might have come with unbearable stress. Emotional hygiene means scrubbing away these unconscious assumptions before they stain your self-worth. Here's the practice that turns philosophy into action. Tonight, power down all devices by 8 p.m., not just putting them aside, but fully shutting them off. Light a candle and grab a notebook. Divide your page into 3 columns: triggers, what stirred strong emotions; reactions, how you responded; and wisdom, what you do differently with stoic clarity. That pang of jealousy when your cousin posted her new car, write it down, then dissect it. Was it the car itself you coveted, or the feeling of being ahead in life? Did scrolling through vacation photos make you resent your budget, or did it reveal a deeper longing for adventure you could satisfy locally? This isn't about judging yourself, it's about spotting emotional lint before it clogs your inner machinery. The magic happens in the patterns you'll uncover. Maybe you'll notice your irritability spikes after certain accounts, revealing who to mute. Perhaps you'll see that your happiest moments align with days you didn't check likes or comments. One executive client discovered her Sunday night dread wasn't about Monday's workload. It stemmed from comparing her quiet weekend to others' curated brunch photos. By the 4th week of this practice, she'd unconsciously started using her phone less, filling those pockets of time with guitar practice and long walks. Emotional hygiene creates space for what nourishes you by removing what drains you. Tonight's digital detox is just the beginning. Tomorrow, try this micro ritual. Before unlocking your phone, place one hand on your heart and ask, "What do I truly need right now?" Often, you'll find the answer isn't endless scrolling, it's a glass of water, a stretch, or a real conversation. The Stoics believed the mind is a sacred space, more deserving of protection than your cleanest room. When you start treating it that way, you'll notice envy's grip loosening, replaced by something far more powerful: the quiet satisfaction of a mind that's swept clean, ready to welcome the new day without yesterday's dust. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal from his closest advisors during the Antonine Plague, a time when Rome teetered on collapse. His private writings reveal no rants about their treachery, only a single piercing question: what muscle is this moment meant to strengthen? That shift from victimhood to student is the essence of Lesson 32. Every relational obstacle, from minor misunderstandings to seismic betrayals, carries hidden resistance training. The coworker who undermines you, they're the dumbbell for your patience. The partner who broke trust, they're the barbell for your boundaries. Even the friend who always cancels plans becomes the sandbag, teaching you to hold expectations lightly. Consider Sarah, who discovered her business partner had secretly siphoned funds for months. The financial blow was brutal, but the real injury was the narrative she initially fed herself: "I'm a terrible judge of character." Then she applied Marcus' question, "What's this conflict teaching me?" and uncovered unexpected lessons. The betrayal exposed her habit of prioritizing harmony over due diligence. It clarified her non-negotiables for future collaborations. Most crucially, it revealed her own resilience. She could survive devastation and still rebuild. 2 years later, her new company thrived with safeguards she'd never have implemented without that painful education. History offers a masterclass in this through the Stoic philosopher Epictetus' insight. What progress have I made? I've begun to be a friend to myself. That's the alchemy of relational obstacles. They force us to become allies rather than critics of our own growth. The parent who constantly criticizes your life choices, they're unwittingly training you in unshakable self-validation, the romantic rejection that hollowed you out. It's carving space for a love that won't require you to shrink. Even daily irritations, the neighbor's loud music, the colleague who interrupts become micro-workouts for your patience and communication skills. Here's how to mine wisdom from relational friction. When conflict arises, grab a journal and answer 3 questions. What did I expect that didn't occur? What part of that expectation was reasonable and what part was fantasy? What would this situation demand of my best self? For example, that friend who forgot your birthday. Your expectation of acknowledgement was valid, but the assumption it proved your worth was the trap. Your best self might respond with gentle honesty. I felt overlooked. I know that's not your intent. Can we talk? The Stoics weren't naive. They knew some betrayals cut too deep for simple lessons. But even then, they asked not why me, but what now? When Seneca was exiled to Corsica, he could have fixated on the injustice. Instead, he used the isolation to produce his greatest writings, telling a friend, "A setback is only a setup for a different kind of victory." Your relational wounds might not reveal their purpose immediately, but the act of asking the question, "What's this here to teach me?" redirects your energy from helplessness to agency. Tonight, try this reframe. Recall one unresolved conflict, a falling out, a workplace slight, a family rift. Imagine it as a stern but well-intentioned coach. What skill is it pushing you to develop? Better discernment, clearer communication, the courage to walk away. Obstacles in relationships aren't roadblocks, they're the uneven bars in your emotional gymnastics routine. Each one, no matter how painful, is sculpting a version of you that can't be toppled by ordinary storms. As Marcus wrote while facing treachery, the obstacle becomes the way. Your next great strength might be hidden inside the very struggle you're praying to escape. Epictetus cut to the heart of most arguments with a single razor-sharp distinction. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, not so we can wait for our turn to speak, but so we can truly hear. That gap between waiting and listening is where relationships either flourish or fracture. Picture a typical couple's disagreement. One person says, "You never help with the dishes," and the other instantly counters with, "I took out the trash yesterday." Both walk away frustrated, not realizing they just enacted a perfect comedy of errors. The first wasn't literally counting dishes, they were crying out for shared domestic effort. The second didn't actually believe trash duty balanced the scales, they were pleading for recognition. Neither heard the subtext beneath the surface words, because both were too busy reloading their next verbal volley. This isn't just about marital spats. A manager snaps at an employee's suggestion, not because the idea was flawed, but because they misheard constructive feedback as a challenge to their authority. A parent dismisses a teenager's rant about school rules, missing the buried question. Do you see how hard I'm trying? Stoicism reframes these breakdowns not as failures of communication, but as failures of attention. When Epictetus advised his students to listen as if your life depended on it, he wasn't being dramatic. He knew that every misunderstanding is a tiny death of connection. Here's the practice that bridges the gap, paraphrasing. Before responding in any charged conversation, restate what you heard in your own words. not parroting verbatim, but reflecting the emotional core. When your partner sighs, "You're always working, try," it sounds like you're feeling lonely, like my job's getting more of me than you are. This does three transformative things. First, it forces you to actually process their words rather than skim for attack points. Second, it gives them the visceral relief of feeling understood, often diffusing half the tension instantly. Third, and most stoic, it creates a buffer between stimulus and response, that sacred space where wisdom overrides reflex. History offers a masterclass in this through the Roman diplomat Marcus Agrippa. Faced with warring factions, he'd disarm hostility by summarizing each side's position so accurately they'd exclaim, "Yes, that's exactly what we mean." Only then would he offer solutions. The modern workplace reveals the same magic. A tech CEO told me how, paraphrasing a disgruntled engineer's rant, "You're saying our process values speed over creativity." Unlocked the real issue. The engineer feared his expertise was becoming obsolete. What seemed like resistance was actually a cry for growth opportunities. Tonight, try this experiment. In any conversation, whether debating politics with your uncle or comforting a friend, pause and reflect back what you heard before sharing your perspective. Watch how the dynamic shifts when people feel truly witnessed. The Stoics knew this wasn't just good manners, it was good strategy. As Epictetus put it, "You can't learn what you think you already know." Listening to understand rather than to rebut isn't surrender. It's the ultimate power move in any relationship. When someone realizes you're more interested in their truth than your victory, they'll lower their guard and real dialogue begins. That's when you discover most conflicts aren't battles to win, but puzzles to solve together. Seneca noticed something unsettling about human nature. We're quick to spot in others what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. He wrote, "We criticize faults we'd never admit to possessing." And this observation cuts to the heart of relational friction. Picture this: you're scrolling social media when a friend posts about their promotion. A sour taste fills your mouth, not excitement for them, but a gnawing sense of inadequacy. The Stoic question isn't, "Why are they showing off?" but, "What does my reaction reveal about my own unmet ambitions?" That's the mirror of projection. It reflects our insecurities back at us in the guise of judgment. Take jealousy as Exhibit A. When a colleague receives praise you think they didn't earn, your irritation might actually be your own fear of being overlooked. The parent who obsesses over their child's messy room, often they're wrestling with their own chaos. Even road rage follows this pattern. The driver screaming at someone's hesitation likely hates their own moments of indecision. Seneca called this the thief dressed as the policeman. We project our shadow selves onto others, then condemn them for it. Here's where it gets transformative. A client of mine constantly criticized her partner's forgetfulness until she asked Seneca's question, "What if this bothers me because I'm guilty of it too?" The revelation stunned her. She'd been scolding him for missing dates while excusing her own chronic tardiness. Her judgment wasn't about his flaws, it was about the shame she felt whenever she dropped the ball. That's the alchemy of ownership, when you stop pointing fingers and start tracing the discomfort back to its source. History offers a brutal example in the Roman senator Narcissus, no relation to the myth. He publicly railed against corruption while embezzling funds himself. When confronted, he collapsed not from guilt over theft, but from the shock of being seen. Most of us aren't that extreme, but the mechanism is identical. The coworker who nitpicks your teamwork might fear being exposed as a lone wolf. The friend who mocks your new hobby could be guarding their own unrealized dreams. Try this experiment today. Next time someone irritates you, whether it's your neighbor's loud parties or your sibling's selfishness, pause and turn the spotlight inward. Ask, when have I exhibited this behavior, even subtly? You might discover your disdain for a friend's neediness mirrors your own hidden dependence on others' approval. Your impatience with a trainee's mistakes could reflect your own perfectionism. This isn't about self-flagellation, it's about reclaiming power. Every judgment you own becomes a compass pointing toward growth. The irony: when you stop projecting, relationships transform. That friend whose success stung becomes a mentor when you admit your envy. The partner you accused of being distant might open up when you confess your own fear of vulnerability. As Seneca observed, no one can humble the man who humbles himself. Your greatest critics lose their ammunition when you've already examined the weapon. Tonight, light a candle and journal about one recent judgment. Write their offense in one column, then search your history for similar moments in the other. The gap between those columns is where your shadow lives and where your next breakthrough waits. Projection isn't just a psychological concept. It's an invitation to excavate the parts of yourself you've been too busy blaming others to face. The mirror won't lie. The question is, will you dare to look? Consistency is the unsung hero of relationships, quiet, steady, and far more transformative than grand gestures that flare up and burn out. The Stoics understood this deeply. While modern culture celebrates dramatic displays of affection, think skywriting apologies or extravagant gifts, Marcus Aurelius modeled something subtler and more sustainable: the daily discipline of showing up. He didn't rule Rome through occasional bursts of brilliance, but through the unglamorous repetition of fairness, patience, and presence. That's the heart of Lesson 35. Intensity excites, but consistency builds. A single "I'm sorry" after a blow-up means little if it's followed by weeks of the same behavior. But small, unwavering acts of respect, like truly listening instead of waiting to speak, or remembering a friend's coffee order, compound over time into unshakable trust. Consider two neighbors. One shovels your walkway once after a blizzard, posting about it on social media. The other quietly salts the sidewalk every winter morning before sunrise, never mentioning it. Both are kind, but which gesture lingers in your bones? That's the Stoic difference. Epictetus compared human character to a stream. It carves its path not through occasional floods, but by the persistent drip of daily flow. Your relationships are shaped the same way. The partner who brings you tea when you're stressed every single time, not just when they've messed up. The colleague who acknowledges your contributions in meetings as routine practice, not just during review season. These aren't just niceties, they're the mortar holding connections together. Here's where most of us stumble. We confuse intensity with investment. A marathon apology after forgetting an anniversary feels weightier than the 100 uncelebrated mornings you made the coffee without being asked. But Stoicism asks, which one truly reflects your character? The ancient teacher Musonius Rufus had students practice philosophy not through lofty debates, but through mundane acts: mending clothes with care, eating simple meals attentively. He knew integrity isn't forged in dramatic moments, but in the 1,000 tiny choices no one sees. Try this audit today. Pick one relationship and ask, where's my care inconsistent? Maybe you're fully present with your kids on weekends but distracted by work calls at dinner. Perhaps you patiently mentor new hires but snap at your assistant over small errors. These gaps aren't failures, they're maps to your next level of growth. A client of mine realized she wrote heartfelt birthday cards to friends but ignored her sister's texts for weeks. That inconsistency wasn't about love, it was about taking certain bonds for granted. The magic lies in systems, not spurts. Set reminders to check in with aging parents every Tuesday. Schedule 10 minutes nightly to ask your partner about their day without screens in hand. These rituals seem small, but they're the antidote to the boom and bust cycle of emotional effort. Like a garden watered regularly rather than flooded occasionally, relationships thrive on predictable nourishment. History whispers this truth through Seneca's letters to Lucilius. Their friendship wasn't built on occasional grand reunions, but on the steady exchange of thoughts, sometimes just a few lines scribbled between obligations. 2 millennia later, we're still reading those words. That's the power of showing up day after day in ways that don't demand applause. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. Missing one day of practice matters less than the commitment to return the next. As Marcus wrote in his journal, waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one, not in flashes, but in the quiet, relentless drip of chosen action. Death sharpens life's focus like nothing else, a truth the Stoics knew when they placed a skull on their writing desks. Memento Mori isn't about morbidity, it's a lens that clarifies what matters. Picture this: you're arguing with your sibling over who should host Thanksgiving, voices rising over trivial details. Now imagine a doctor quietly informing you this is your last holiday season. Suddenly, the table settings and seating charts dissolve into irrelevance, and all that remains is the raw, aching desire to sit across from them one more time. That's the power of death as a teacher. It strips away the petty to reveal the sacred. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, whispering to himself upon waking, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think, not to paralyze himself with fear, but to electrify each ordinary moment with purpose. History offers a heartbreaking example in the letters of Pliny the Younger, who described his uncle's final moments during the eruption of Vesuvius. As ash rained down, the elder Pliny didn't race to save his valuables. He comforted terrified slaves, telling them, "Fortune favors the brave." When death brushed his shoulder, his priorities crystallized instantly: people over possessions. Modern psychology confirms this phenomenon. Terminally ill patients rarely regret not working more or acquiring more, but overwhelmingly wish they'd risked vulnerability, expressed love more freely, and repaired broken connections. The Stoic twist: you don't need a diagnosis to live with that clarity. Here's where theory meets action. Identify one strained relationship you've been avoiding: the cousin who betrayed your trust, the old friend who drifted after your political disagreement, the parent you only call out of duty. Now apply Marcus' lens. If this were their last month or yours, what would you want to say? Not a dramatic farewell, but the quiet truth that's been lodged in your throat. Maybe it's, "I miss how we used to laugh," or "That comment hurt me more than I admitted." The key lies in specificity, not grand gestures, but granular honesty. A client of mine finally texted his estranged brother, "Remember when we built that tree fort? I've been saving this hammer we stole from Dad's toolbox." "Want it back?" The reply, "Only if we use it to fix something together," became the bridge they'd needed for years. Resistance will whisper that it's too late, that the rift is too wide. But the Stoics would counter with Seneca's question, "How much more time do you think you have?" The answer is always the same: not enough. Yet even a single sentence can begin the repair. The coworker you've been icy toward might soften with a simple, "I think we got off track." The neighbor you've avoided since their dog ruined your garden could unlock decades of camaraderie with, "I owe you an apology. I made it mean more than it was." Death's urgency isn't about despair. It's about liberation from the prison of someday. Tonight, light a candle and write 2 letters. The first is your unvarnished truth, all the anger, hurt, or disappointment you've stockpiled. Burn it. The second gets 3 lines: one memory you cherish, one regret you carry, and one hope you're willing to voice. Send it, deliver it, or if the wound is too fresh, place it in an envelope marked, "When I'm ready." The act alone will rearrange something inside you. As Marcus wrote while leading Rome through plague and war, "It's not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." Your mended relationships aren't just reunions, they're resurrections of the parts of yourself you buried with the silence. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, had a radical view of emotional balance. He called it the middle path between ice and fire. Picture a friend who texts you 15 times a day needing reassurance, their messages pulsing with frantic energy. "Did I mess up that meeting? Why hasn't she replied? Do you think they hate me?" Now imagine the opposite, a colleague who responds to your vulnerable confession with detached advice, as if analyzing a spreadsheet rather than a human heart. Both extremes miss the mark, Musonius would argue, because true connection thrives in the temperate zone between suffocation and indifference. This middle way isn't about lukewarm compromise, it's precision tuning. Think of a gardener watering seedlings. Drown them daily and the roots rot, withhold entirely and they wither, but consistent, measured nourishment. That's where resilience grows. A client of mine struggled with this balance when her best friend spiraled after a breakup. Initially, she dropped everything for nightly crisis calls, neglecting her own sleep and work. When she finally set boundaries, "I can talk Tuesdays and Fridays after 7, her friend accused her of abandonment. The Stoic question here is surgical. Am I erring toward excess, over-functioning for others, or deficiency, emotional withdrawal? My client realized she'd swung from one extreme to the other, missing the midpoint where care and self-preservation intersect. History offers a masterclass in this through Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers. When her sons became revolutionary politicians, admirers praised her for living solely through their achievements. She corrected them. "These are my jewels," pointing not to her sons, but to the scrolls she continued studying independently. Her love wasn't possessive or detached, it was rooted in mutual growth. Contrast that with modern helicopter parenting, or the hands-off approach that mistakes neglect for fostering independence. The middle path being the steady harbor that lets ships explore storms, knowing the anchor remains secure. Here's the litmus test for your relationships. When someone shares a problem, pause and ask, "Does my response empower or enable?" The needy friend who panics before every date doesn't need you to screen their outfits. They need you to reflect back. You've handled tough situations before. What's your instinct here? The colleague drowning in stress benefits more from what's one small step you could take right now than either taking over their project or offering hollow thoughts and prayers. Musonius taught that true support should resemble a trellis, providing structure for others to climb, not vines that smother or absent space that forces wild, unsupported growth. Try this recalibration today. Identify one relationship where you felt either drained or distant. Jot down 3 recent interactions. Did you overgive until resentment simmered? Under-respond until guilt nagged. Now script a middle-way alternative for the friend who demands constant validation. "I believe in your ability to handle this, and I'm here to debrief after you try." For the sibling you've avoided because their politics infuriate you. "I don't need us to agree, but I do miss your laugh. Can we share a meal without debating?" The magic of the middle path is that it's dynamic, not fixed. Some days require more presence, a loved one's grief or a partner's job loss. Others demand respectful space, a teenager's bid for independence or a colleague's need to fail and learn. Like a sailor adjusting sails to shifting winds, Stoic balance means constant micro-corrections, not rigid perfection. As Musonius reminded his students, even the sun doesn't scorch and freeze in the same hour, yet it never ceases to shine. Your relationships will thrive when you learn to radiate the same adaptable warmth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding yourself in the ranks of the insane," and then promptly admitted he probably belonged in those ranks himself. That's the secret sauce of Stoic humor. It doesn't take human seriousness too seriously. Picture the most cringe-worthy moment you've tried to bury in memory. Maybe you tripped in front of your crush, called your boss mom, or spent an entire dinner with spinach lodged in your teeth while everyone politely looked away. The Stoics would tell you to stop flinching and start laughing. Not because the embarrassment wasn't real, but because your reaction to it is the only part you control. Take the time Emperor Augustus, a student of Stoicism, accidentally boarded the wrong ship and found himself stranded overnight on shore. Instead of raging at his guards, he quipped, "I'd rather be the man who got lost than the man who was too afraid to sail." That's the pivot turning life's face-palm moments into punchlines before anyone else can. Your colleague just caught you talking to yourself in the elevator. Beat them to the joke. Don't worry, the voices say you're great too. Your date notices your nervous sweat stains. Own it. My armpits are just really supportive of this conversation. Here's why this works. When you laugh at yourself first, you disarm the sting of embarrassment like a knight dropping their own sword. Epictetus, who was born a slave and walked with a limp from his master's beatings, joked that his limp was just nature's way of reminding him not to run from philosophy. That's the difference between self-deprecation and self-loathing. One comes from a place of secure humility, the other from insecurity. The Stoics weren't suggesting you become the butt of every joke, but that you stop treating your ego like fragile china that might shatter if someone bumps it. Try this today. Mine one of your most mortifying memories for humor. Did you accidentally reply all to a rant about your boss? Now it's your party anecdote. And that's how I learned the undo send feature was invented for people like me. Spilled coffee on your interviewer's white shirt, your new icebreaker. I like to make sure potential employers remember me, usually with stains. The key is delivery, not a pity-seeking, "I'm such a mess," but a confident, "Can you believe this happened?" History's greatest Stoics knew this. Cato the Younger, famous for his stern principles, would deliberately wear outdated togas to Senate meetings just to chuckle at the whispers. When mocked for his old-fashioned sandals, he shot back, "Better to be asked why I'm wearing these than why I'm not wearing any. That's the golden rule, laugh with, not at." Your blunders aren't failures, they're friction points where your humanity shines brightest. Tonight, share one self-inflicted awkward moment at dinner or over text, not as a confession, but as a gift. Watch how the room relaxes when you give permission to find life absurd. As Seneca wrote while exiled on a rocky island, sometimes even to live is an act of courage and comedy. The spinach in your teeth, the name you blanked on mid-introduction, the toilet paper stuck to your shoe during your big presentation, those aren't embarrassments. They're your stand-up material, courtesy of the universe's playful sense of humor. The Stoic question isn't, "Why me?" It's, "How soon can I retell this story?" Because the fastest way to take the power back from life's little disasters is to be the one holding the microphone. Imagine you're caught in a storm at sea, waves crashing, wind howling, the deck pitching beneath your feet. What keeps the ship from capsizing? Not the sails or the rudder, but the anchor, buried deep below the chaos. Stoicism teaches that virtues are those anchors in relational storms, the four unshakable qualities that steady us when emotions threaten to overwhelm: wisdom to navigate, courage to endure, justice to act fairly, and temperance to find balance. These aren't abstract ideals, they're practical tools forged in the heat of real conflicts. Take a compromise scenario. Your partner insists on moving across the country for their dream job, but you've just settled into a community you love. The easy paths are clear: dig in your heels and refuse, or surrender resentfully. But the Stoic question cuts deeper. Which virtue is this testing? Wisdom asks, what's the most thoughtful way to weigh both needs? Courage whispers, can you voice your fears without ultimatums? Justice nudges, are you considering their growth as much as your comfort? And temperance reminds you, extremes, total sacrifice, or rigid refusal rarely lead to lasting peace. History offers a masterclass in this through Antipater of Tarsus, a Stoic who faced a similar crossroads. When his city demanded he abandon philosophy to serve in government, he didn't rage or capitulate. He applied the virtues like a surgeon's tools: wisdom to recognize his civic duty, courage to negotiate terms preserving his teachings, justice to ensure his students weren't abandoned, and temperance to balance public service with private integrity. The compromise he reached became legendary. He'd serve, but only if he could keep teaching in the evenings. Here's how to spot virtue gaps in your own conflicts. That recurring argument about household chores, it might not really be about dishes. It's a test of justice, fair distribution, and temperance managing frustration. The friend who vents endlessly but rejects advice, that's a call for wisdom: when to listen vs. guide, and courage to set boundaries kindly. Virtues aren't just for grand moral dilemmas, they're the lenses that reveal the true stakes of everyday tensions. Try this reframe next time a relationship feels stuck. Pause and name the virtue being challenged: your siblings' refusal to help with aging parents. Justice is the missing anchor, not just fairness in labor, but the deeper equity of respect. Your own hesitation to apologize first, that's courage trembling at the thought of vulnerability. The Stoics believed every conflict is a gymnasium for virtue. The heavier the weight, the stronger we grow. The irony: when you anchor in virtue, outcomes often resolve themselves. The partner's job relocation becomes a creative discussion about remote work or trial periods. The chore wars evolve into systems where both feel seen. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one, not perfectly but persistently, one anchored choice at a time. Marcus Aurelius had a peculiar habit that put life's chaos into perspective. He'd close his eyes and imagine viewing Earth from the stars, not as a daydream, but as a deliberate mental reset. Picture this: you're in the middle of a heated argument with your partner about who forgot to pay the electric bill. Voices rise, accusations fly. Now imagine the camera pulling back, farther, farther, until your entire neighborhood is a speck, then your city, then the continent, until the planet is just a pale blue dot swirling in infinite blackness. Suddenly, the unpaid bill isn't just insignificant, it's invisible. That's the view from above, Stoicism's ultimate zoom-out button for when emotions threaten to hijack your better judgment. This exercise isn't about dismissing real problems. It's about differentiating mountains from molehills. A medical diagnosis, that's a mountain. A passive-aggressive text from your sister about holiday plans, that's a molehill you've been carrying like a boulder. Marcus wrote in his private journal, think of the totality of time and space, how small a part of it you occupy. He wasn't belittling human struggles. He was offering a lifeline when we confuse drama for destiny. History gives us a stunning example in the Apollo astronauts. Many returned from space with what they called the overview effect, a radical shift in perspective after seeing Earth's fragility from orbit. Disputes over borders or ideologies seemed absurd when you couldn't even see them from space. The Stoics achieved the same mental shift without rockets. When Seneca faced slander campaigns, he'd imagine his critics as ants squabbling on a pebble, not to dehumanize them, but to remember how little their noise ultimately mattered. Try this today. The next time you're spiraling over a coworker's snide comment or a friend's late reply, pause and conduct a mental time lapse. Fast forward 1 year, will this moment even register? 5 years, the stains from your toddler's juice spill won't show in your family photos. The Instagram post that made you feel inadequate will be buried under 1,000 newer pixels. Even deep wounds, the breakup that gutted you, the job rejection that stung, eventually become chapters in a larger story, not the whole book. The real power lies in the follow-up question Marcus asked. If not in a year, why am I letting it consume me now? That's not rhetorical, it demands an answer. Your pulse might race when your boss criticizes your presentation, but if that feedback won't matter in 12 months, why grant it 12 hours of rent-free headspace? This isn't avoidance, it's selective engagement. Like a sculptor chipping away excess stone to reveal the art beneath. The view from above helps you carve away emotional clutter to reveal what truly deserves your energy. Here's the practice. Keep a cosmic check note in your phone. When something triggers you, a parking ticket, a rude customer, social media envy, jot it down and label it. Will this matter in 1 month? 1 year, most entries will fall into the first column. For those rare few in the second, that's your signal to invest deliberate effort. The rest, imagine tossing them into space like confetti. The irony, this perspective doesn't shrink life, it expands it. Petty grudges fade, but gratitude sharpens. That fight over taking out the trash becomes a chance to cherish having someone to share chores with. The friend who forgot your birthday might suddenly be forgiven when you remember their recent divorce. Marcus knew this secret. Zooming out doesn't diminish love, it amplifies it by removing the static. Your final challenge, live this week as if viewing from orbit. Watch how the small stuff shrinks and the real stuff, laughter, quiet moments. The people who'd miss you if you were gone glows brighter than any star. We've traveled through 40 lessons, but their essence distills into 4 anchors. Control, relentlessly focusing on what's yours to govern. Presence, meeting each moment as if it were both fleeting and sacred. Forgiveness, releasing others' mistakes so your own soul can breathe. And growth, welcoming every friction as a whetstone for your character. These aren't abstract ideals, they're the daily bread of relationships. Your marriage isn't just a union, it's a gymnasium for patience, that co-worker who tests your limits. They're an unwilling sparring partner, honing your emotional reflexes. Even the barrister who gets your order wrong is offering you a micro-lecture in grace. Stoicism transforms relationships from battlegrounds to dojos, places where we train, not just endure. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing," he might have added, "and the mat is everywhere." Your family dinners, group chats, and even traffic jams are all practice sessions. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Not to never feel anger, but to notice it before it becomes venom. Not to avoid hurt, but to question what stories you're attaching to the pain. Seneca, in his final letter to Lucilius, left us with a torch to carry forward. As long as you live, keep learning how to live. This isn't passive advice, it's an assignment. Today, choose one lesson that resonated most. Maybe it's pausing 10 seconds before reacting to criticism, or writing a forgiveness letter you'll never send. Perhaps it's simply asking, "What's this moment teaching me?" as your toddler melts down or your boss vents frustration. Progress doesn't demand grand gestures, just consistent, small turns of the wheel. Now we turn the mic to you. In the comments, share which Stoic tool you're sharpening first. Was it Epictetus' discipline of Assent or Marcus' cosmic perspective? Your insights might light the way for others navigating similar storms. Because here's the secret no philosophy book mentions. Stoicism isn't about solitary strength. It's the art of being human together. When we polish our own virtues, we become mirrors where others can glimpse their best selves. So keep the conversation going. And remember, whether you're weathering a conflict or savoring a quiet moment, you're never merely living life. You're practicing it. One mindful breath, one intentional response, one imperfect but courageous step.